Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast. This is episode 27. You might say it's the first episode of year two. And as is tradition, I'm joined by Barry.
Hello, hello. Are we doing seasons? Is this S02, E01?
There is a function to put seasons into Spotify. I thought we should have sort of a more significant marker for seasonal change than just, the
number
passing,
of episodes.
the number of episodes or even the passing of a year.
Sure. Well, this will be episode 27. Long may it continue.
Yeah, long may season one continue. Season 2 will introduce cool CGI effects and reviews by AI. So,
AI reviews of AI games.
AI reviews AI art and AI games played by AI while we all work in the Trump factories. Right. Moving into our normal schedule. I say normal schedule because we've got so I think we should probably talk a bit more about the tariffs because there's been massive developments. I mean, even when I put out the episode 2 weeks ago, which was recorded a week before we aired it, things had already changed massively. So I feel a bit like, on the one hand, fortunately, we talked generally enough about this stuff that it didn't become completely redundant. On the other hand, things had already escalated and changed quite significantly. Now, there have been a number of quite significant developments that I would like to touch on, but if you're here for fun hobby times and all of this stuff is very depressing and sad to you, that's why I'm doing it first. So you can find the time code for the regular news in the description down below. Just skip right over this and then just let the podcast play out as normal. And you can just pretend none of this is happening. So check the time code in the description down below. In the meantime, obviously, Trump has continued to increase tariffs on Chinese imports. There has been an enormous number of articles and posts and things coming out of the board game community. Largely, they seem to be in the same pool, the same mood as everyone else. There seems to be some agreement. There is one article that's been circulating on the social medias from Dwight Senac, the designer of High Noon, which he posts on the news articles of his website, which sells his games. And he was sort of calling out the industry and being very critical. I do not know how accurate all of that is. I think there is some interesting information in there that could highlight pitfalls that designers may fall into and mistakes they might make, or easy mistakes they might make. And I can see certainly some new designers, especially if they're publishers or self-publishing designers, have gone straight to the consumer via crowdfunding. I can see how they could fall into some of those pitfalls. I am conscious that, one, Dwight doesn't seem particularly bothered by these tariffs and does seem to believe that the American federal government has a plan going forward, which a lot of people are doubting. We'll not get into that because, as Barry did point out on our last episode, nobody wants to hear us talking politics. And is this politics? Well, now we get to see the fun center of the Venn diagram where politics and real life overlap. Bursting out of the Westminster bubble and into your homes and wallets. But what we have seen in Dwight, and it's, I'm also conscious Dwight wrote a book about how to crowdfund and publish your own games, which he has some experience with because he's published a game and seems to be, people seem to like it. But so it's not completely unbiased. There's a book to buy if you want all of this good advice for free. So Jamie Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games did call out the article and said it was incorrect. And I think if there's one lesson we can take away as pundits with no experience, Barry, it's that this is quite a complex shipping and logistics from China globally is quite a complex and difficult issue. And it does rely on the interworking of, international companies and also, Chinese freight companies who have got to complete these shipping manifests correctly using the correct tariffs and codes. and that getting those codes right can be, difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But presuming that, but I would be very, very surprised to discover that big companies, I say big companies, but quite established board game companies like Stonemaier Games, or who've been kickstarting and producing games in China for over 10 years, or Cephalofair, the Gloomhaven people. I'd be very surprised to discover that they were still losing millions of dollars because they were using the wrong uh, tariff codes on their shipments, which is sort of what Dwight is claiming. Dwight's numbers are also like, quite a lot of them are conjecture. And, while there are some interesting points around how money raised from crowdfunding is being used to fund product and retail product, there is also, a sort of, I think, um, an unaccounting for example, the salaries and overheads that go into a much larger business. And I'm talking about, like, because it's obviously like a 10-person board game company is not that big a business in the grand scheme of things. It's kind of microscopic. But in our industry, 10 people is actually quite a big company, because you're largely either one of those massive, well-established companies that's been around for ages, or a small studio and often, one-man operation, where we look at like Red Raven Games, which is mostly Ryan Lockett and his family, or City of Games, which is basically just Frank West making, the games he designs. So not big companies, even though they can give the impression of being quite large because they make a lot of units and, sell a lot of games. But it's all about that context.
Yep. I mean, is it worth mentioning a couple of known casualties, or so people can understand how it's actually going to affect their board game purchases in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, all of this sort of discussion that's happening in the background is, it's, obviously it's very upsetting for everyone who's affected, everyone who's losing their jobs. I think it's, the thing, one of the things we sort of recognize about board games, and especially this, whole industry, and I've mentioned this before, is that board game production is a passion project. It's always a passion project. And the reason it's a passion project is because, if you just want to design games and all you care about is making games, then you make video games because distribution's functionally free. you know we make board games because there's something about the tactile physical nature of it, having the actual product in hand, having nice art by real artists is something that we really appreciate and value. And the sacrifice is that instead of finishing the game and then just putting it up on Steam for free where anyone can buy it, they go into China and they manage all the logistics of printing these things and shipping them all the way around the world. And to be fair, like, when you see the actual production costs, the pure unit costs of producing a game in China, they're surprisingly low, you know? And, people do question, is that because, Chinese labor is not well regulated? And I think, there are some good points to be made about that, but specifically not in this industry. My understanding is not in this industry. They are quite well regulated, or at least, the reason why it's so cheap is because it's massively efficient, because they've got entire factory sectors that are devoted to producing these products, and instead of having to ship the products over country lines or even across China, they can just drive them from one factory to the next factory down the road, because they're all just hyper focused and hyper efficient. At least that's my understanding. So you get these incredible production costs, and the unit price is quite low as a result. But then you've got everything else that goes into it, And when I just think about how long it takes to deliver a product, all of the graphic design, all of the art, all of the rules testing and writing, and you know, the just it's people's full-time jobs as well, so you've got all those staff overheads to cover as well. Like, it's not cheap to do, and the return is not as high as it would be if you had a more efficient product. So, it is this amazing passion project that it's just very cool that we're all so passionate about. And it's easy to forget, like when you're a board game reviewer critiquing these things all the time, that's why we're here and we're doing what we do. It's not easy to forget, actually. It's why we're here doing what we do, because we love the hobby and we love games. And to that point, it's very sad to see that we've seen some publishers beginning to shut down. Specifically, the two big examples that we're aware of at the moment are, of course, Final Frontier Games, who made Coloma and Merchant's Cove. They had a Kickstarter called The Sixth Realm, which is unfulfilled. They made a big post about this, which I will not get into necessarily because they cited a whole bunch of reasons. And I think, the reason I bring up the sort of the challenges of making a game and the logistics of it and all of that is because you can see how sort of when you've got these, quite, specific, bespoke physical products that you're shipping internationally, you're shipping globally, worldwide. It's a complex chain of things for this product that's pretty niche and bespoke. So you can see why this is not an industry with a lot of leeway, with a lot of headroom for additional challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Final Frontier highlighted a whole number of reasons why they suffered. One of which, just to bring up an example, and maybe why I'm not going into it in too much detail, because this is kind of he said, she said, and I don't have rebuttals from any of the people that Final Frontier have accused of contributing to their closing of the doors. And ultimately, it's very sad because all the people there will have lost their jobs, and that's very upsetting, especially if they've been working on this for a long time and put a lot of their own effort and money into making this dream come true. But they blamed, for example, Cool Mini or Not, who put in a big order for a foreign language version of one of their games. Apparently, Cool Mini or Not have not paid that bill for that order, and so those units which Final Frontier have produced are just sitting there. And we could get into a conversation around how Final Frontier shouldn't have produced anything before they paid the bill.
I mean, to interject with that thought there, Simon has replied to somebody from their customer service team and who said effectively they contracted 65,000 units to be paid on delivery, and so it's more of a contract issue. Because obviously Simon aren't going to pay for it if they don't have it.
Right, but I thought that they were delivered. Are the units not delivered?
My understanding from Simon's side is no, they've not received them. After a number of delays, they still hadn't had them. They're contracted for these units upon delivery. Whether or not they've been made and then they need the payment to deliver them, but that's not what was agreed.
Right.
So yes,
and so
like he said, she said.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know the production status of those units, whether the order was fulfilled or partially produced, or whether they're sitting in a factory in China and just needed to be driven over to Simon's warehouse, and it was just the cost of that final leg that was missed out. We don't know. But it sounds like it was something that could have potentially been resolved amicably if these companies were not necessarily running around trying to solve the major disaster, which is American tariffs. Final Frontier went on to blame a number of other factors as well. The sad reality is they're all losing their jobs, and all the backers of Sixth Realm aren't getting their game. In addition, I think there were some other backers or people who bought some Merchant's Cove or Coloma stuff that might not get it either, which is a real pity. It reminds us as well that, it's not just publishers who are very passionate, but also, consumers and, the hobby. The people in the hobby, we pony up all this money on crowdfunding, which is effectively a interest-free loan for publishers to go away and, make things happen. And we just kind of rely on them to do that, in good faith. And I'm not saying that Final Frontier necessarily took advantage of that. I'm just saying that, it means everyone suffers when these things begin to fall apart because of whatever issue. in this case, a political issue. Um, Greater Than Games. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. I'm really sad about this. It is part of the Flat River Group, which is a conglomeration of studios. I believe Flat River Group are sort of coordinating logistics for distribution and things like that. And they've got, something like 15 or 20 studios that contribute to the Flat River Group, and Greater Than Games is one of them. They are best known for Spirit Island and Sentinels of the Multiverse. They also had a recent hit with Compile, which Barry and I have been talking about, the 2-player card game. I was really surprised to see Flat River Group shutter this studio, and I don't really understand the motivation behind it. Again, I would like to have comment on this from Flat River Group. They did post a announcement to Greater Than Games' news feed, which functionally said the studio's closing down, but we're going to continue to produce their catalog of games, so you don't need to run out and buy all the Spirit Island stuff. Apparently, it will still be produced and sold. It's just that the actual staff who work in the studio have been let go, which I don't think would really know about, except that Daryl Lauder, who is the creative director at the company, posted it to his Facebook and said, we've all been fired and the company's disbanded. So it sounds like they've kept the brand and the catalog of existing titles, but all of the staff who worked there, since long before I think it was part of Flat River Group, have all been let go. I don't really understand the motivation for this, if I'm honest, Barry.
I don't. I mean, if they weren't, it's not like they hadn't just produced another game that was looking to be quite successful. So yes, it is an odd one. Spirit Island's an evergreen title. I don't know what sales look like necessarily, but always number one in the solo category and very well regarded in general. I mean, is it top 10 on Board Game Geek? Yes, 10th. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, we love Spirit Island. Well, I don't know about you actually. I love Spirit Island. And ever since I backed it on the first Kickstarter. You can find that series a million years ago where I play it horribly wrong with Ollie on the channel. But you can. But I mean, I know that. So Sentinels of the Multiverse, also very popular, has its fans. I'm not one of them. I don't mind the game, but I just find the volume of admin outweighs my enjoyment, especially once you start adding in all the expansions and extra bits. It's just so many tokens and modifiers flying around. And especially if you've got many players. Just, oh my God. But a lot of fans of Sentinels of the Multiverse, and they recently did a big box sort of Ultimate Edition that was very successful. And actually, they had a new Kickstarter for it, which I want to say was called Disparan. And that's supposed to be coming out. It's not been delivered. Who knows what the status of that is now that they've shuttered Greater Than Games. I hope the backers of that do get their game, but it's unclear whether or not the outstanding Kickstarter there was a reason why. I'm conscious that Sentinels of the Multiverse is punchboard and card, so I would be very surprised if you couldn't produce that in the United States. It seems like, if they can produce Earthborn Rangers in the United States, which is just punchboard and cards, you can produce most of Sentinels of the Multiverse. So I don't know why they couldn't find a way to produce that domestically. There's not been an announcement about it. Hopefully some more news comes to light in due course. It does look like the kind of thing that could be printed in the States, but on the flip side, it looks like this was just long enough ago. It was actually funded in April 2023 by crowdfunding, so that could have been just enough lead time to produce it all in China, print it, box it up, and then get stuck thanks to the Trump tariffs. So we'll see what the future of that looks like. But obviously, very sad news for everyone at Greater Than Games who've produced, as far as I'm concerned, 3 titles now, Compile as well, that people really, really like.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with Compile. So Games Lore, who I've pre-ordered Compile 2, Season 2 with, sent out a message today, saying they're stopping pre-orders for Compile 2 until they know the situation. They will endeavour to fulfill the pre-orders for people that have already ordered, but they're not taking any more. So I think that just speaks to the uncertainty of what's going on. Retailers and distributors probably don't know much more about what's going on with some of these companies and some of these products than we do. It's not, overly public information. It's not well shared. So we just have to wait and see kind of what's going on. Should they filter through into retail, of course, I'm sure retailers will sell them. But we just have to hold on and try and find out.
Yeah. I mean, and it's, concerning Compile Season 2, yep. I think, again, it's just a box of cards, so that could be
shiny
feasibly,
cards, though.
But they are shiny. They're very high quality. It's true. And Games Lore is a retail store here in the UK. I'm also, I forgot about this note as well. Handelabra Games, who make the Spirit Island digital app and Sentinels of the Multiverse digital app, did make a post on their Discord talking about how sorry they were to lose all their friends at Greater Than Games. And it does seem a little disingenuous. The post on the actual Greater Than Games website doesn't mention anything about any of the staff being let go. And really, we wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for Handelabra Games making a post and Daryl Lauder posting it on his Facebook. And I get the impression from the Daryl Lauder post that this was not necessarily made with good
logic.
It doesn't sound like they all got down in a room and talked it through. It sounds like he turned up to work one day and suddenly his job was gone.
Yeah.
So that's very strange. But in the meantime, Stonemaier Games posting about suing the president. If you haven't seen that, you can go and find that. That will be a couple weeks old now when you hear the podcast. But Jamie Stegmaier made a post on Stonemaier Games' newsfeed. I'll put a link to it in the description. Actually, I've got a link to it. They're going to sue the federal government, I guess, because of the impact of the tariffs. And we've also got the COO of Cellofair was on CNN talking about the impact on smaller board game companies as well. So I'll put a link to that. That's on Facebook. So if you don't have a Facebook account, I don't know where you can find that, but I'll put that in the description as well if you're interested. He does quote a few numbers that I haven't verified and I haven't independently checked. So, again, all of this stuff, take it with a pinch of salt. But it looks like this Cellofair are concerned that this is going to impact the delivery of Gloomhaven 2nd Edition.
All still developing, so keep your ear to the ground.
Yeah, keep your ear to the ground. Keep an eye on the developments as things unfold. When we recorded the previous podcast, I think Tariffs were somewhere up at 100%. By the time I released it, they were at 200%. Now I think they're at 245. So that's only at time of recording. And this is recorded a week in advance. So it may well be the case that when you're listening to this, everything else has changed again. But that's the tariff update. We'll keep an eye at least on the elements that are really going to affect you, the consumer, like the closure of publishers. And I know that there's a twin set of retail stores in the US called Borderlandia. There's 2 of them, and one of them has shut down thanks to the tariffs as well. So that's a real shame. But I do understand they're also keen to note that the other Borderlandia is remaining open. So if that affects you, you can go find out whether it's your local store that's closed. But enough of this. It's all very depressing. Shall we talk about some games?
Well, talking about some games, of course, the what we've just discussed has impacted some things. We often look at crowdfunding, but the uncertainty has impacted the landscape in many ways. With whilst a lot of projects were already planned to be released, some have already been cancelled, and things have been a little quieter these last couple of weeks than they might otherwise have been. But that said, things are getting back to normal, and there are a few crowdfunding campaigns ongoing at the moment that look relatively interesting. First one is a game I spoke about last week, but Hubworld Aidalon, which is the newest game from Earthborn Games, the guys behind Earthborn Rangers. And this was a spiritual successor to Netrunner, which is obviously one of my favourite games of all time. And it is released, and you can buy the entire first season in whatever format you wish, the complete collection for yourself, or with all the bells and whistles, upgraded tokens, playmats, up to 4 copies. Now, all looks fine. Obviously, more things are coming out about the other cards. The tester cards sit in the sort of decks that I had access to play previously were a little, not disjointed, but unfocused would be a good word. So I don't know what a constructed deck has the capabilities of doing. And it could be that the cards that are in there were not some of the more powerful cards either. But that's all up and live. I'm sure there'll be more reveals, and you can learn a little more about the game on the Game Found page if you were interested. Now, the price for the full game is something like $80, I want to say, which is probably about right. It's like 2 core sets off an old FFG game, or something like, the core boxes that they do now, which are singular. But I don't know, for some reason, for me, it's just a bit high to be pulling the trigger. You get 300 cards and the tokens needed to play for that price. You still have to pay shipping and whatnot on top, but that is, I don't know, it's not unreasonable by any stretch of the imagination. It just doesn't immediately grab me as being like, okay, yeah, I've got to get that to play. I don't know what to say about that necessarily. It just doesn't feel good to me, and I don't know why.
Yeah, that's really a really emotional reaction you're having there, because I'm sure you just spent way more than that on Vampire the Masquerades.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, there's many times more cards in that, but comparatively, I probably paid more for this product that's going out of print. And so I think that's like just an indicator to me, actually, I'm not that interested in playing this. I'll play somebody else's copy, and if I like it, maybe I'll come in on it a little later. It is live for the next couple of weeks, so it'll still be live by the time you hear this or see this. And no doubt we'll have late backing for people that come along later. They have a very realistic funding goal as well, of sort of $200,000. That is to be sustainable, to potentially weather any of these tariff changes, as well as pay people without having to rely on immediately coming out with something else to pay the bills.
But it's worth noting as well that Earthborn Games, are the same company that did Earthborn Rangers, and they've already said in their updates for that game, hey, as part of our sustainability plan, we produce this nationally. So they produce the Earthborn Rangers in the States, they produce it in Germany, and they produce it in China, depending on what markets it's going to. And I would not be surprised if they didn't do the same thing with Hubworld Aidalon. I don't know if they are. I'm just saying I would imagine it's the same kind of production, cards and tokens, so I'm sure they probably could.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, I guess. But to as part of that sustainability, they also want to sustain their business, and so rather than setting 100,000 goal, which would be enough to print the game, they've gone for that higher goal, which is enough to sustain people to work on it and give them enough breathing room to create expansions, or assuming it does well, which I'm sure it will.
And we definitely should be applauding companies that put realistic goals and are candid about how much things cost and what they need the money for. This whole sort of like overfunding thing to unlock a ton. It's just a way of sort of generating hype for a bunch of what often amounts to unnecessary bloat.
Agreed.
Also in the news, I don't know if you saw this. I don't know if you've played this. I don't know if you're excited about this, Barry. Trickerion 10th Anniversary Edition.
I have played it, not the 10th Anniversary Edition, of course, and I've not played a lot of the modules. There's a few expansion elements to Trickerion. Yes, it's quite good. That's Mind Clash Games, is it?
Yeah, it's Mind Clash. It's designed by the original Mind Clash team, which is, so, they sort of, Mind Clash sort of made their name doing Anachrony, which is a big David Surtsey design, sort of put Surtsey on the map. And then the Trickerion. So the original designers were Richard Amann and Victor Peter, and you'll see Victor Peter's name come up on a lot of the Mind Clash products, because I believe he is the founder. They are the founders, I think. But the Trickerion was, of course, the game of putting on magic shows, and it's a big sort of heavy Euro game about getting your ducks in a row and then filling these sort of recipes. It's quite savage. It's quite mean. I've played the original with all of the sort of modules that came out when it first came out. They later were printed in expansion, which was something Row or the Technicians or something.
Yeah, maybe I've played with that actually.
So that was the Dawn of Technology, which I haven't played with. I've only looked at. So I played with Dalgard's Academy and Dalgard's Gifts, which were in the original Kickstarter. And then they've got a new expansion called the Arcane Arts, which will be available with this 10th Anniversary Edition. I mean, the one thing I note about Trickerion is it's quite long.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty mean, and also there's no good catch-up mechanisms. So if you did bad, prepare for a long road to failure. But
unless other people do bad in the future.
Unless other people mess up in the future, it is possible, but there's not a whole lot you can do to compete with people that are playing and not making mistakes themselves. So low-level player interaction, but it's got this really great sort of worker placement mechanism where you're kind of bidding on placements, and then each worker placement spot rewards you some action points. And so, like, when everyone reveals their cards to show where they're going, you can see, I better get in there and get those action points before they do. Or maybe you don't care as much about that one, so you can deprioritize it, but everyone else is sitting there going, they're going to take my spot. So it's like 2 tiers of worker placement that creates a lot of fun tension.
Yep.
Yeah, I like Trickerion.
I liked it. I don't think I was good at it. I think I played one sort of base game, and then I'm not sure if it was the expansion or maybe it was one of the original modules that added. I think it might be that Dark Alley or whatever it's called at the bottom.
So I definitely recommend playing with Dark Alley. They say don't do it for your first game, but what Dark Alley adds is the ability to get better workers and things. And I think it feels like it's only an optional module to present a lighter version of the game. But I do think it suffers for its exclusion.
Yeah. No, I played that, and I do enjoy Anachrony as well. Not played all the modules.
Very different. Anachrony is very different.
Yes.
But, well, I guess a similar kind of heavy feel. But Anachrony, I feel like there's a bit more options for sort of player interaction around the worker placement, just in terms of sort of deliberate blocking. Because in Trickerion, you kind of have to like do these hidden bids to block spots off. But I think this is a good chance to get a nice copy of the game. And if you do want to know more about it, or whether it's for you, we did a whole series on it. You can find a rules video by yours truly and a playthrough there as well, and see if this is something that you want to get involved in.
Nice. And then just launched as well on BackerKit this time is Valley of the Kings Ultimate. So this is a deck building game around ancient Egypt. You're going into the tombs, the pyramids, or whatever, finding the artifacts, gathering sort of sets. Cards do different things. It's a little different from in terms of the marketplace, in that the marketplace is often built like a pyramid, so what you've got access to on a given turn can change and things will drop down depending on how you're playing the game. I've played it a bit. The original version, there was a premium edition in 2019 which I never managed to play. Played it solo and had a relatively good time with it. There's sort of set collection type elements within it where you're trying to get things to pair up or make sets of things to combine to get the stronger effects, removing them from your deck to score the points. It does something different with the mechanism, so it has always been applauded for that, and has been rated relatively highly. The original 7.0 and the 2019 edition 7.4 on Board Game Geek. This one is probably will end up being higher because people love rating games that they paid a lot of money for higher. But also this is a larger production. The cards are now tarot sized, and one thing that was a problem with the old design was there was quite a lot on there and it didn't look terribly good. They've reworked the graphic design. It's a new company producing it. It was previously done by AEG, and I forget who's taken it over. World's largest RPG have taken it over with AEG's blessing, no doubt with some money as well, and are making this along with a new version available to anybody that wants it. So, worth checking out if you like deck builders. My only concern with this one is, again, going back to what we've all just been speaking about, it's $50 shipping. Right, so that includes the VAT and the shipping to EU and Canada. So $20 is $99 to buy. So $20 of that is VAT for the UK, and $30 is shipping, which is relatively high for one game, like a box. And what they've not put anything in, there's different levels, and one of the levels includes a large wooden box with 4 different boxes inside it, or just the large wooden box itself. And there's no difference in shipping price for those that they've mentioned. And I'm just wondering if much of that is subsidising the $25 US shipping, even though of course there's no VAT added to the US one, and whether or not they ask for tariff fees later, I don't know. But it seems odd that a much heavier, much bigger box would be shipping for the same price as your standard board game box. And it just seems like they've not really planned out the logistics, and that's what you don't want in this current environment.
Yeah, it looks like they've left a note here on the Kickstarter page that says, as of April 2025, imports of goods from China to the US are subject to higher than usual tariffs. Like, yeah, way higher, like so much higher that the global economy is reacting. This isn't just like a minor thing. And they've said, we are doing everything in our power to avoid delays or cost increases and keeping an eye on the situation as it evolves. And I gotta say, like, it does seem like a lot of the board game industry is like, we're keeping an eye on the situation and we're praying. Like, we've had to resort to blind faith because there's no practical alternatives.
Yes, a little bit. Now, we can assume there might be some changes that will go in their favour, but it's just not really... It does not inspire me or give me confidence that they're going to be able to weather anything that might go wrong. So bear that, pinch of salt. It's not that
very low printing cost, albeit it is a card game, but that wooden box is fancy.
That wooden box is fancy, and the boxes that go in the wooden box are fancy too.
Well, just on a final note, I did play Valley of the Kings once long ago. It was a tiny little box, and all I can really remember is the art on the front cover.
Fair. The people I've spoken to and the people that own the game, they liked the game because it came in a little box and it was portable and they could take it somewhere and they could play 1-2 players.
That's exactly what I got from the person who showed it to me.
Yeah, and so having a massive box with tarot-sized cards now, whilst looks great, is a very different proposition. Does the game hold up? I would think so, but your mileage may vary. Give it a try before you buy.
You're suddenly competing with an entirely different space, right? Like if you've got space to get out this big box and set up all these tarot-sized cards, you've got space to basically play anything.
Yes.
Well, anything short of Kingdom Death Monster or Aeon Trespass Odyssey or something. But, it's just like when you're a tiny little box and you can set up on a tray table or on a train or something, you've got that's a niche, that you can fit into, that these big games it would never work.
No. But that was the sort of new things I saw coming to crowdfunding. So it is continuing business as usual. let's not panic too much just yet.
Mhm.
And then in the broader space, miniatures game. So last week was Salute 52. So that's a war game convention here in London, run by South London Wargamers. They hold it at the S.H.E.O.L, which is a large function hall over at Greenwich. And I saw a couple of things. The first thing I saw was Burrows and Badgers 2nd edition. So this is published by Osprey Games, and it is imagine a Red Wall style vibe. So the anthropomorphic animals, who, well, this is a skirmish game, a skirmish war game. So they're fighting each other across a smallish battlefield with different powers and different stats and things along those lines. They're all sort of individual characters, more than rank and file. If that makes sense, what the difference is between the two there. And this was absolutely packed for most of the time I was there. And I left afternoon, just as afternoon started. So I'd been there 3-4 hours. And every time I went past the stand, the queue was huge. And people were moving through that queue, but the queue was huge. There must have been, because it's 2nd edition, it's mostly the rules that have changed. A lot of the minis are still previously haven't been produced. There are some new ones. And it was just people with baskets of minis picking up the new rules. They'd very much taken over the entryway for a lot of stands that wanted to show off what they were doing, but had no space because there were just people coming through. The stands at Salute are typically not very large, so it did create a bit of a bottleneck, and everybody was just, the two workers were just using a calculator to add up the prices and then charge people on a Stripe machine. So there was no like scanning to make things any quicker. But it was super popular, and but I've never played it, and I didn't pick up the rules, so I couldn't tell you how different it is. But it did look like it was having a bit of a renaissance with the 2nd edition, shall we say. And the minis were very cool. We made a base. There's a possibility to make a little miniature base when you're there, play with the grass and make something cool. We picked up a cat with playing bagpipes, which we'll paint up and stick on this base. But we didn't. The minis themselves are quite cool. Whether the rules are any good or not, I couldn't tell you, but it seemed very, very popular for the duration of the time I was there, which was multiple hours. And in other minis news, Weird Games have announced Malifaux 4th edition. So a very long time ago, I played Malifaux 2nd edition. I never played any of 3rd. And it was a great game. I really enjoyed it. You flip cards to trigger abilities. So a pack of playing cards has sort of a Weird West vibe. All the abilities are sort of on your cards, and you objective-based skirmish game. It's got a bit of a darker undertone, shall we say, with this Weird West. There's sort of monsters there. There's demons and ghosts and all these kind of things that go on. The 4th edition rules are now open. They're being sort of open tested at the moment, and a lot of the changes seem to have really streamlined much of what nothing went wrong with 3rd edition, but it became quite bloated to some degree. And they seem to have streamlined a lot of things, made it much more interesting, much more quick paced, reduced the time of the games down, which is what you kind of want for a skirmish game, and have a lot of new ways of playing for the sort of war bands that you might have, and some of the new war bands that are coming out. So it's looking like it's pretty good so far. I've not managed to find anybody that's playing a game, but I'm not super into minis games anymore. But it is worth noting, because there's also, it is an IP. There are RPGs set in this the world of Malifaux, and other things may be coming. There's board games as well. I forget what it's called though. I've played it. But that's it, yeah. News wise, those are the things that are new and exciting for me. I don't know if you've seen anything that's new or exciting for you.
Yeah, so I got a few things. I don't even think they're live on GameFound yet. They're sort of coming to GameFound. in the near future. So this is just a S.H.E.O.L, but they're all games that I'm sort of somewhat familiar with because of I've looked at them in the past, or perhaps worked on them or played them. So this is just sort of my observations. Number one is Andromeda's Edge Genesis, new content for Andromeda's Edge, which was the big, giant Luke Laurie space game that came out. The sort of reimagining of Dwellings of Eldervale. Luke Laurie has commented on the GameFound campaign for Andromeda's Edge Genesis, saying, "I'm adding in a bunch of stuff that I wouldn't play the game without, unless I'm teaching it to people who've never played before." And so far, all we know is that this will include new factions, new enemies to fight, whatever that means, if it means more raiders, which exist in the game, or another system. There is now sort of raider technology that you can get and put in your tableau to give you powers of some sort, I guess. You can take control of raiders in a way you can't currently. Apparently, there will also be events that affect the game moving forward. Obviously, the game has an event deck. It kind of acts as the timer for the game, actually. Well, sort of. Anyway, it's linked to the timer of the game. But now there will be ongoing events that change the game state moving forward, I guess, persistently. I don't know. And finally, it says explore new regions, whatever that means. Another map, new map, just more tiles. I don't know. But if you follow on GameFound, you will find out. And that's it. I was going to say there might be a free gift because there often is on GameFound, but it doesn't look like there is for this one. So anyway, you'll just have to follow it and find out. I will let you know more as I know more. I have played Andromeda's Edge. I'm happy to play Andromeda's Edge. I like Andromeda's Edge. It's a lot. It's very big. For a game that's this big, with this much interworking Euro mechanisms, it is kind of just a roller coaster. Like, you can have all your best intentions. You can make good decisions. There's still a lot of luck in the game, and you can still kind of get screwed out of stuff. And it's borderline, like, I would never want to teach it. I could. I'm quite good at teaching games. I just wouldn't want to, you know?
Yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't. I think the learning game for this would be rough unless you're playing with people who are, you know, deep in the hobby and are very good at assimilating rules. Fortunately, you can strip out a lot of the content and you can play a much more simplified version. But again, like, having played the full whack, I wouldn't want to go back to that other stuff. I do think this is a game that, you know, it almost feels like a sandbox exploration game. It's not. It's like a sandbox exploration game if what you're exploring is Euro mechanisms, but rather than, you know, a world or setting or, you know, an adventure or an environment, you're just exploring different tracks and possibilities on those tracks, you know? But what I'm conscious of is that the full whack gives you just more stuff to do, and that's exciting, and I like it, and so I'd happily play this with people, you know, who are across it or who are sort of really into the hobby and could sort of assimilate this stuff quickly. But I also wouldn't probably show it to like my heavy Euro crowd either, because unless they're also unless they sit in that overlap between like sort of goofier games or funner, no, funner is the wrong term, but games that take themselves a little less seriously, right? This isn't just pure logistics. It has got quite a lot of luck in it, but you need to be managing the logistics effectively as well to succeed in the game. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Hope so.
I have played Dwellings of Eldervale. I've not played, was it
Andromeda's Edge.
Andromeda's Edge, yeah. I get them mixed up every time because I've not played either. And yeah, okay, fine. I kind of get what you're saying there. Of course, funner being wrong for a couple of reasons, mostly because it's more fun. But let's not worry about it.
Well, the reason I stopped on funner is fun is super subjective, right? You know,
yes,
and we could do an entire podcast that could probably last a whole season about what is fun. You know, case in point, I have a point about on this later when we get to what we've been playing this week. But that's so. Anyway, the point is, Andromeda's Edge reprint coming, more content, another expansion. So that's exciting for the people that maybe missed out on that or wanted that really big fancy edition. or who are just really into it and want to do more of it. Sniper Elite, Operation Kraken.
Ooh.
This is the expansion for Sniper Elite, the board game, which I played a few times. I played it solo on the channel in a live stream. I did receive Sniper Elite, the board game, as a review copy from Rebellion Unplugged, so thanks to them for that. I have mixed feelings about Sniper Elite, the board game, because I've not had very good experiences with it, if I'm honest.
Huh.
But I really like the premise and I like everything about it. But I played it at the UKGE where we were given the review copy, and I played it with Michael and Chris, and they both hated it. We took turns. I was the sniper the first time, and then Chris was the sniper the second time. If you don't know anything about the game, it's 1 to 4 players where one person is the sniper and the other players are the Nazis, and it's a hidden movement game. And the sniper's planning their movement with a dry erase board that mimics the board. And then the Nazi players are moving the Nazi operatives around on the board and effectively asking the sniper, like, do I see you? Are you here? You know, it's a very sort of short game. It says it plays in 60 minutes. That's actually quite right, unless your Nazi players are being incredibly thoughtful about their moves. But I don't think it scales particularly well at player count, because every additional player over 2 just divides the Nazi forces up. So at 2 player, it's the exact same at 4 player, except, you know, one person's controlling all the same forces as 3 players. It doesn't, and so actually every additional player is just adding game time as well, because now the Nazis are discussing everything, which is fine. Like, it's not a problem, especially if you prefer to be on a collaborative team. It's not a problem. It's just, you know, I'm observing that if I had 4 players and we were going to play a hidden movement game, there are probably better options. You know, what's the Sherlock Holmes one?
Is it Sherlock
Whitechapel.
Holmes or
Whitechapel springs to mind. Letters from Whitechapel, and then the stripped back successor, Whitechapel, both spring to mind. Although they are demonstrably longer. But I really sort of, and there's sort of all these cool, like, thematic things the sniper can do, like throw a rock to distract people, you know, and things like that. And I like the way they track the movement on the whiteboard. They've got, you know, they can also snipe things. And the way the sniping works is you've got like a bag that you're building, and you pull tokens out the bag until you hit. And then if you get like a certain number of like misses, then it determines how badly it's gone. Like, you know, did everybody hear you, or did you pull off the perfect sniper shot? And that's very exciting and compelling. So there's a lot of stuff in here that I really, really liked. But when I played it with Michael and Chris, they were the Nazis, and they just found it incredibly frustrating, and they felt like there was nothing they could do. When I played against, when I played with Michael and we were the Nazis, we played against Chris. Chris was, well, everyone was getting frustrated. So I won't, I can't remember why. So it was years ago. But then I later played 2-player with a buddy of mine who's a historical game designer. And those games, nobody was getting, we weren't getting frustrated. We seemed to be enjoying it, but we never, it never felt, we did not have a great time with it either. Like, it never felt exciting. And actually, the 2 games he won as the sniper, he never even fired the sniper rifle.
Okay, fair.
So I like a lot about it, and there seems to be a lot of love for it, but it's a game I like in theory more than in practice. I've still got it. I kept it. The solo mode I would leave. I couldn't be bothered with the solo. I mean, I played it on the channel, but I didn't like it. So it's not really for me anyway, these solo modes. So, you know, don't even bother worrying about my opinions on that. But I'll maybe I'll get it down and give it another try, given that they're, you know, launching another campaign, and I'll see if I can't sort of manifest the experience I'm hoping to get from it. If I can't, then maybe it's a lost cause, and I'll move that on. We'll see.
Fair. Yeah, I certainly know a group that play it quite regularly. I've never managed to be there on a day when they're playing. Last time we played Risk, would you believe? And I taught them Libertalia. And then, but yeah, I want to play. I want to play Project Elite. I want to play Mind Management. I've never played Fury of Dracula. I've played Letters from Whitechapel, which was I thought was okay. I never got into Spectre Ops either, but like I want to play some of these hidden movement games. I don't have one. I thought Project Elite might be a good one. I think I'd prefer it at 2 players rather than more.
When you say Project Elite, you mean Sniper Elite?
I mean Sniper Elite, yeah.
Okay, yes, good. Okay,
Well,
you said
not
Project
if you're
Elite
not.
twice, and I was like, that's not a hidden movement game.
No. But if you're not sniping, then surely it's just Elite.
Yeah,
If that's
exactly
the way to
right.
win, then just Elite.
We can call it Allied Elite.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I don't know the Sniper Elite video game at all, but my understanding is that it is as much about sniping as it is about just World War II action and stabbing people and things. So maybe not every map needs to be about sniping, but there's only 4 maps if you have the expansion, which I don't actually have. So I only have 2 maps.
Okay.
And if one of them is not about sniping, then it's only 50% sniping. Like,
True. I also can't really tell you how much sniping's involved. I downloaded and played, maybe not the most recent one, but the one before it. Maybe the most recent one, I don't know. I played it and I ran out of bullets. I'm like, there's still loads of Nazis around. And then I switched it off and I came back to it and I started shooting and then I accidentally moved the stick and I was like, oh, I can walk around. I just assumed I had to sit there and snipe people, but that's not how the game works at all. You have to run around and do different things and sneak up through bushes and all this other stuff. So I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah, there's a fair bit going on in Sniper Elite. Right. Oh yeah, and for what it's worth as well, just very quickly on that, given that we went into a little bit of detail there, it is designed by Roger Tankersley and David Thompson, and the artists are Jose David Lanza Cebrian, Eduardo Grud, and Ed Savage. On that note, Terrorscape is a hidden movement game, and it is coming back to GameFound. And this is a 1 versus many as well. So if snipers aren't your style, maybe you like horror. Because Terrorscape is everyone is a teen trying to survive. Yeah, maybe not teens actually. But everyone's teens trying to survive, and one player is the monster. And what you've got on the board is a big plastic mansion. Or actually, I think it's cardboard. I think it's plastic if you got the Kickstarter Silly Edition, and a big cardboard mansion in the retail or available edition. But it sits in the middle of the table, and then the teens all sit around one board on one side of the mansion and manage their movement and things. And the monster player, the player who's playing as the creature, or I think it's actually a sort of supernatural murderer psychopath in the original core game. I don't know how much extra content there was for this as part of their Kickstarter, but I've only seen the core box. But one player's playing as that and moving around the mansion as well, and they're sort of giving each other clues about what noises they can hear and things like that until the creature lunges out and tries to kill people. The designer is Jeffrey CCH, and the artists are Arepko, Roxy Dye, Samuel Horowitz, Nilanjan Malakar. And the art's really cool, actually. I saw this set up at Essen, and I'm going to get to a sort of a bit more about it here, but also Amanda Phelps and Domingo Pino. Those are the artists. So I really liked the look of this at Essen last year, and I asked Ice Makes, the Chinese production company, if I could have a copy, and they very kindly gave me a copy. So I'm sitting on one here. I've not played it yet. I will endeavor to play it so that we can talk about it in a bit more detail, because Terrorscape 2 is coming to GameFound, and you can acquire the game through that campaign. I presume they'll reprint the original stuff, but I can't say for sure. Editor Mike just quickly interjecting here to say that Ice Makes have clarified they will reprint the entire Terrorscape 1 campaign as part of the Terrorscape 2 campaign. Right now, if you follow the campaign, you get a meow card, which is a little cat.
Cats often jumping out during horror films. I've not played Terrorscape. I know it is again, very well liked by the people that um, have it and like it. So the most common complaint, or not complaints, I see, is that a lot of people regret not backing the additional killers. It's more, I wish I'd got everything, is the most common comment I see from people that have Terrorscape. So that's got to be a plus.
Yeah, that sounds like a complaint in favor of the publisher.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've only got, I think, the retail core set here. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I will crack it out and I'll get a game in and I'll let you all know how that is. Hopefully before this next campaign launches. Finally, last thing from me for the news is S.H.E.O.L. You ever see this? S.H.E.O.L. So this is a miniatures board game, a big sort of miniatures board game that. And the only reason I'm sort of familiar with this at all is because they actually approached me about producing content on it. Unfortunately, it didn't manifest, so I didn't actually work on it. But I did read the rules for their original game that was coming to GameFound or crowdfunding. Actually, it might have been Kickstarter. I don't know. But the original campaign they were doing for crowdfunding, and what I'm aware of about this game is it's cooperative. You are heroes. You're fighting against these sort of unseen, sort of Lovecraftian-esque supernatural forces. It's some kind of dark futuristic landscape, and you all live in this sort of citadel or something, and you've basically got to sort of explore outwards from this citadel and, I don't know, light these beacons or put out these sort of shadow things, and these monsters will be spawning and coming out and attacking. So it's a bit like sort of sort of exploration come wave defense type game, and where you're all fighting against the darkness. That's about as much as I remember about it, having only read a prototype rulebook many years ago. But it looks like that they've had enough success to come back with a 2.0. It says this is a reworked version of the game with extensively revised and brand new content. This will be the definitive version of the game, which also sounds a bit like a lot of people struggled with our first version, so please come and look at this.
Fair. Yeah, I've never seen it before, I don't think. I mean, it's weighted quite heavily, but 4.9, 4.09, sorry, 4.9 would be ridiculous. But it's also well reviewed, but I guess that's from the people that backed it and I've stuck with it. So it looks interesting enough, but not the kind of game that I would necessarily jump on.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's sort of scenarios and sort of linked story that develops as well. So this is sort of a big one with, I think, maybe like pseudo mini campaigns and things. You know, this isn't like a sort of light cooperative game. You know, this is more of a big sort of session thing that you might do multiple sessions of and have a narrative and sort of really explore the world of the game as well and get into, which is the sort of thing I quite like. But unfortunately,
well, you would.
I haven't had a chance to try it. So that's it for me for things coming up that I'm sort of vaguely familiar with, at least somewhat familiar with.
I've heard of once.
Yeah.
Nice. So what we've been playing? The question on everybody's lips.
This is the thing that everyone cares about. Well, you've got some detailed stuff here to cover, which is good. I've got one detailed thing here to cover. So I had a couple of friends visiting on the weekend, and we blasted through a whole bunch of stuff. Sort of middleweight games that have been keen to get to the table, classic games that I love playing, all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk a bit about just relevant to today's topic. Played topic was diversity. You know, diverse, interesting games, and also fun. What is fun? Case in point, on Saturday we played Shackleton Base with all four of us. And afterwards we were tired out and quite drunk, so we played Lupin Louie and Pitch Car. And that's my
tactically intense.
Strategically intense.
Yeah.
We also, over the course of the weekend, got in Great Western Trail El Paso, which I think we'll touch on. We played Tavern Tussle, Super Kawaii Pets, Trekking the World, DroPolter, and Wild Gardens, and Puerto Rico. So I am something of an omni gamer, Barry. That's quite a selection. We won't go
That
into
is, yeah.
all of them, but I'll mention a few of these in passing because I ought to.
Sure. I've been playing a variety of things, but a couple of new ones to me, and one that we did speak about in the last podcast that I thought I better give a go. That looked quite interesting. So maybe I'll start there. So in the last episode we spoke about Corey Knitska retirement and talked about some of his games. One of those games was 3000 Scoundrels. So this is published by Unexpected Games, which was his publishing house, and the artists on this one were are David Ardila, who did The Initiative and some Star Wars games, and Matihos. I'm going to try and pronounce this in one go, but Gebreze Alassi. That's unreasonable. I apologise if it's wrong. Who did some art on the Chronicles of Crime series. So this game is a sort of Old West setup that uses card crafting to some degree to make up 3000 Scoundrels. The cards have a character with a power and a power, and they both go into a sleeve, and that determines their cost and what each scoundrel can do. But the purpose of the game is to collect purpose of the game is to get the most points, and the way you're going to get the most points is by collecting 3 safes from different areas of the town, which have actions, which have points in them. And we played the expansion, which changed some of those safes to also have special powers or scoring abilities that would give you a bit more focus on what to do. And my understanding was that the expansion made the game much more enjoyable from the point of view that you can focus on, you can have like an idea of what you want to achieve in the game, an overall strategy after you see a safe or two, and that you can work towards improving your scoring and building up something, which was a little more difficult in the base game because these safes were just flat points. There are still some flat point safes in the expansion, but this was the big change. So the way the game plays out, I now know, is that you have 4 or 5 cards. On your turn, you're going to play one of those cards to an action on your player board. Everybody's got the same actions. But the number that you play dictates what that action is. So if you wanted to take a safe, for example, you would have to play a 5. Now you've only got 1 5 in your deck, and you want to get 3 safes in total for the game to end, or before the game ends. So at some point you're going to have to bluff having a 5, and the other players around the board can decide whether they think you're bluffing on this turn or a future turn, and they can call you out. They can place some of their workers on your, not worker, but like they place a token on your bluff, and if they're right, they get a point and you lose a point. And so you've got to decide when you want to do it. And the expansion also has a little twist that you start with your 0, which doesn't have a slot. So on your first turn, you must bluff somewhere throughout the round. And so players have you can't just have a round where you tell the truth completely. And that's that. So you work to gather the most points from the 3 safes that you steal while building up these scoundrels. It was not good. We did not have a good time, unfortunately. So even with the expansion, which I've seen people say, oh, it's really makes it more worthwhile, I did not find that was the truth. My opponent, we just played 2-player just to see how it worked. My opponent spent a lot of time fiddling around with these scoundrels. Now the scoundrels tend to trigger off the different values you play, giving you more reason potentially to bluff certain numbers for what you're playing. He had 7, there's only space for 7, and he was swapping them in and out. Like he was really going to town on making the powers work and getting what he got the most out of every action that he was doing. I had 1 in the end, and his board was full with 7. He scouted about 8 of the safes, so that's looking at them, seeing what powers they had, seeing what values they were. I scouted 3, and that was all 3 of those were after I'd taken my first 2. He had loads of powers for stealing money, so I never had any money, and a couple that gained him reputation, and I just had my starting power that you draft at the start, and he'd guessed a number of my bluffs, and I hardly caught him at all for some more point swings. At the end, I had safes that were worth a lot of points, and he didn't. And that's the only way. It's not the only way, but it's the main way of scoring points. And I took my first 2 safes practically blind. I took my first safe blind as my first action. Safes can only score up to about 7. Their base score 7. They might have an additional power that let you score more. And I got a 7, like a 3 and a 1 that had bonuses on them. I managed to get a couple of points throughout the game for a sub 20 point finish. So it's not a high scoring game. And he had some points during the game and just managed to pick up worse safes. And so I got to the end and I'd done nothing. And it felt like I'd done nothing because I never had any money to do anything. I could just potter about, make a couple of guesses in a turn and get my safes. And he did all this stuff and pottered around and did loads of combo-y type stuff and was triggering all these scoundrels and still lost. And I'm like, that is not a great game, particularly. So it was a bit disappointing to play, just because of the randomness. I can't say too much more about it. The game itself was functional. He actually had quite a good time playing. I didn't have a good time playing, even though I was able to get good saves. And it's just,
fundamentally, we always say, like, it's a big problem when the stuff that's fun to do is not also the stuff that wins you the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to have to choose between, like, scoring points or, having fun.
Yeah.
Like, that's silly, right? So that doesn't sound very good.
No, I mean, there's very few points to be made during the game. When you catch somebody in a bluff, you get a point, they lose a point, and that can be quite big. Like, that's a 2-point swing in a game that's...
I like that idea. I like bluffing. I like calling people.
I like that idea. I did not enjoy the execution. He seemed to guess my bluffs, even though I was like, well, why am I bluffing having the lower coin value when I could bluff having the higher coin value? And he's like, that's a bluff. I was like, what? Why are you doing that? Like, we're playing on Board Game Arena as well, so it's not like he could see me. It's not like I was, shaky hands putting down a bluff. I didn't have any real tells, as far as I know. And he's just like, oh, that's a bluff. I was like, what? So just a blind guess as well there in terms of earning points.
To be fair, there is some magic to bluffing games that is lost on Board Game Arena.
Yeah, I'd agree. But and I just kept, right, well, that has to be a bluff because that's like the 3rd time you played that number. I was like, nope, bluffed it last time. So, gosh darn.
Yeah, I do enjoy that. It's a bit like in Coup where people just keep saying they're the Duke and they're like, and you're like, God, how long are you going to be the Duke for? Oh, God, it's just like, I should have just called you like rounds ago, because at least then if it was true, it would have prevented this.
Yeah.
or not true, whatever. If I'd called it then, if I'd had the guts to call it then, at least we wouldn't be in this mess we're in now. So I do really like that element. I'm sorry to hear that the game didn't really pan out.
No, I just didn't land. Like, I had a safe that was worth 7 and it was worth extra points if I had a safe of, I can't remember what value, like a 3. So the first one I pulled was like a 3, and then I was like, okay, well, that's not worth that much, but I can make it worth an extra couple by getting a token on it or whatever. And yeah, it didn't land.
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to cover a lot of these very, very quickly. I'm only going to go into a big detail on 2 games. So I'm going to prioritize in order of detail, starting with the lightest ones. I'm not going to talk about our play of Puerto Rico because y'all know Puerto Rico. It was Puerto Rico. I will jump straight into DroPolter because this is basically just a shout out because it's very strange. This is a little oink game that I picked up because the core mechanism of the game is not one I'd ever encountered before. And it's one that I pull out when I guess we have like 5 minutes or something. Like literally, you can play it while someone's in the bathroom. It's a mad simple little game. It's a deck of cards and then 5 sets of 5 items, a whole bunch of little bells, and a ghost. And the 5 items are like a seashell, a ring, a wooden thing that looks like a waffle. There's a red cube and a little wooden key. And it feels almost like some publisher was like, these are cheap if you want to buy them. And Oink was like, we'll make a game out of this. Sorry, not publisher, some manufacturer. And so the game is you have to hold the 5 things in your hand, and then you flip over a card, and it shows a bunch of things that you have to keep in your hand. So you basically have to knock stuff out of your palm using just one hand while holding on to the rest of the things. There's an advanced mode where you're not allowed to look at your hand while you're doing it, which is very fun. And then if you do it fast enough, you grab the ghost, the little wooden ghost that's sitting on the table. It's actually quite a big wooden ghost. The wooden ghost on the table. And if you're the first one to grab it, you win a bell. First to 5 bells wins the game, but the wrinkle is that you have to hold the bells in your hand while you're doing the rest of it. And if you drop a bell, then you lose the point. It's so fast and weird and quirky. I really like it. Like, it's just peculiar. Suffice to say, I played it with my 2 friends who were here visiting, and one of them really liked it. He was also incredibly good at it. The other friend was not very good at it, and because they're quite competitive, did not really take to it as well. But overall, fun was had. It's always a good laugh, and that's DroPolter.
Nice.
So this is designed by Paul Schultz, and the artists are Juan Sasaki, Jun Sasaki, and Ri Komatsuzaki. Published by Oink Games.
Nice. Sure, I'll stick with just quick short ones. I've got a couple of games I want to talk about a little more at length as well. One game you might have heard me mention before was Bomb Busters. This is a game published by Pegasus Spiel and designed by Hisashi Hayashi, who also did Trains, really good. Yokohama. I don't think I've ever played Yokohama. Have I played Yokohama? Maybe.
I've played Yokohama.
Any good?
Yeah, I like it. It's like quite a complex sort of Euro logistics game, and its main conceit is that you've got all these buildings you need to do things in, which are tiles laid out on the board, and you move around the spaces, but your meeple has to move orthogonally on the tiles, so you can't always do the action you want because you actually have to walk around the actions.
I get you. Yes, sometimes I get that confused with Yamatai. Very different game. Artist on this one is Dominique Ferland, who's not done much else board game wise, but has her own, has his own, I don't know actually, art style, which you can see on Instagram. Very cool. So I spoke about this before. I played it at BarryCon last year, and I'd been itching to kind of get it back to the table. You know, I'd given it like an 8 at the time. It was kind of that level, and I did say it had the potential to go up, or potentially, if all the missions were a bit weird, go back down. I've now played sort of the first box, right? So the first set of missions that changes up the rules a little bit. Brilliant. I've upped it to a 9. I could go to a 10. I've still got 50 missions to go through, 50 plus missions to go through. It is so good. I would think 4 players is probably the best number. I don't think you'd have anything. I don't think it'd be bad at 5 players. I've not played at that high a player count yet. 3 players is a problem because you get up to 18 tiles and they don't all fit in a single rack. And so if you've got 3 players, you need 6 racks, and you've only got 5 racks. Is the main thing. We solved it just by putting things at the side, so it wasn't a big deal. It is so good. I mean, I don't even want to. If you've not seen Bomb Busters, it's a logic deduction game, cooperative, where you are bunnies for whatever reason, or bears, defusing bombs. The missions, you go through the tutorial missions, it just teaches you have to pick another player and say what number their wire is, and you match it with the number that you have to cut the wire. You're avoiding the yellow and red wires. Well, you're avoiding getting them wrong for a start, but you're avoiding the red wires to blow them up. And then the different scenarios massively change up the game as you play. And I don't want to say anything because even though it's not, you can play the game without any of the scenarios, just the base game, matching those wires is great. The scenarios change things up more than enough already. Every scenario is different, even though core rules don't change necessarily. What you're doing doesn't change necessarily. Just what you can do and how to approach it. Brilliant. It's brilliant.
And how long does it take to play a session?
You can play a scenario in 20 minutes. And so playing the 8 missions of the tutorial, which gets you up to the full game, would probably take you an hour and a half. There's a bit of shuffling, right? So by the time you've set it all up, there's a bit of faff between rounds because you've got to mix up all the tiles, then get your tiles, then sort them out. But beyond that, the learning it and the changing it, 15, 20 minutes you can play a scenario in, and that's including the time to learn the new rules, which are never difficult, or haven't been difficult so far, and change it up enough that it's just like really interesting. Maybe I'll give one spoiler. Put some spoiler tags over this.
Mimu, spoiler.
Yeah. So you got 3 seconds to move on. Michael put a timestamp. Spoiler free. It's not a big spoiler. I wouldn't worry about it too much. All it does in one of the missions, or multiple of the missions actually, is put a timer on it. Right? Which you might think doesn't change a lot, but the pressure it adds to actually, well, now I can't just sit and math out everything that's there is an issue. But similarly, it turns it into a free-for-all. One of the early missions turns it into a free-for-all. You're like, if you know something, and it wasn't just your go last, you say snip, and then it's your go, and you call it out. So normally you go round and round and round and round. And they just put a 15-minute timer on it, which was plenty of time. We did it in 7 minutes. But everybody was just kind of, oh no, yeah, snip, oh no, ah. And it was just a blast to play. Again,
yeah,
end of spoiler.
As someone who, well, before you end the spoiler, actually, as someone who does sometimes just put random timers in games, just because I know how that impacts people's mentality.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm brilliant. I'm more for that. I think more things should have a chess clock. Let's go.
I found just a 15-minute countdown on YouTube that said the number every minute, and so every time that went off, everybody was just like, no. And then when you get down to the ones that you don't know, and it's like, but you have to know because I don't know and he doesn't know, so you have to know.
That can't take the pressure.
Yeah. It's just fun. If you like logic and deduction games, right? If you don't like logic and deduction games, it probably won't do that much for you, but you should definitely give it a go. I think this could definitely be this could be a 10 out of 10, right? This could be something I want to go back to over and over again. The base game is fun. I've not mentioned everything that's in it. There's equipment, there's powers, there's things that you can do that changes up what you know. And it's just difficult. It's just easy enough that everybody thinks they can do it. And it's just difficult enough that when somebody messes it up, you're like, of course it wasn't that, you idiot. And you can...
Well, hopefully I will have a chance to play this at some stage. Another really, really quick one for me. I'm going to blast through this super fast. This is Tavern Tussle, a tiny box game from Louis Brew, his publishing company, Brew Games Inc. He is also the artist. I picked this up actually because I went to buy his game that I really, really like. I went to buy Keep the Heroes Out at Essen, and he threw this in as a sort of review copy, I guess, for press. But I had not seen it before. And the premise is, I guess, that you're collecting sets of adventurers in a tavern, and it's a drafting game where everyone reveals a card simultaneously, and then the cards are adventurers, and they have initiative, and then they trigger a little power. And I think it wants to be sort of like just a fun little, little bit more player interaction. Once you learn what the heroes do and how they do, there's a little bit of like second guessy, I could pick this one and that would be great, but then they might pick that one. And you can see the sets people are trying to collect and maybe try to like hate draft a card that they're trying to get the icon on, but it didn't quite come together well enough. You couldn't target the people who are winning deliberately well enough. it kind of became a foregone conclusion. And if you have an attack and you can't target the person who's winning, there's no reason not to kick down, which is also kind of a bummer. There's also an advanced rule, which actually just forces you not to attack the same player twice in a row, which doesn't seem like an advanced rule. That seems like the opposite of an advanced rule. So very curious little game that doesn't quite manifest what it's trying to do. On the other hand, presentation's great, art's great. Louis Brew should continue to make games because I really like his art.
Yeah, well,
and he has, of course, done Keep the Heroes Out, which I like, and Night Parade of 100 Demons, Night Parade of 100 Yokai, which I haven't tried, and Dwarves, but spelt with a 7, which I also haven't tried.
Yeah, so Dwarf with the 7, so Dwarves 7s Fall, right? They gave away at Expo a few years ago. They must have given away loads of them. And we got a copy. We tried playing it there and then, and it was fine. But none of us felt particularly keen to have a second game, shall we say, there and then. That may say more to the perceived value of something you've been given for free versus something you bought, but it was nearly there. It was nearly fun enough, but it wasn't something that kind of stood out that you would be like, okay, I've got to show people this.
Well, that's fair enough. Anyway, yeah. So Tower and Tussle, I wouldn't. It's only 10 minutes long, but I wouldn't bother.
Yeah. There's other games that fill that void.
Yeah.
Fine. Well, I'll talk about a game that I've been playing a little more of then, and that game is Unstoppable. So this is published by Renegade and designed by John D. Clare, who did Space Base, Mystic Vale, and Empire's End, among several others. The artists for this game are pretty much too many to name, but the studios and individuals who are quite well known in board game circles. Check them out because the art is very nice, but I don't know specifically like who did the cover or anything, so I couldn't really call them out individually. This game is a 1 to 2 player, but part of the solo hero series from Renegade Games. It is a card crafting deck builder. Now, John DeClare's worked with this card crafting system in various guises in some of his games before, but what it involves is having clear sleeves and you're sliding cards in either over the top or, in this case, in between cards to change the abilities and values on those cards. In this particular one, the cards come with a chunk out of the side, and you can upgrade them with a bottom upgrade and a top upgrade that fill that gap to improve your deck as you go, in addition to being able to purchase more cards with different starting abilities, right? And there's different levels of cards as you go. You got to work your way up from level 1 to level 6 and become unstoppable.
Yeah, I get it. That's the name.
That's he said the thing. You should put it up invincible style, just like Unstoppable. So the card crafting system obviously requires a little bit more physicality and a bit more interaction with the components than you might in a normal deck builder, where you're just sort of good to go. Whenever you get a new card, you have to sleeve that into an existing enemy card that you don't get to see. And you'll gain a new card at the start of your turn every turn. And that's just like a given. And it's the only real way to... It's not the only way. Some card gives you powers that let you get additional cards, but it's the only real way to add cards to your deck. Otherwise, you're looking to upgrade the cards by spending a currency to get those 2 different upgrades, the lower and upper upgrade in it. So the problem with that is that I actually quite dislike the physicality of the system. And where I've done, where I've played these sort of card crafting games before, apps have done them better. And I think in this instance, the level of fiddliness would be better served potentially by being an app. So all the cards require sleeving, and that's not true. Half of the cards require sleeving. Your starter cards will have the front on them and a fixed enemy on the back. And then your enemy cards are sleeved face down. And when you get a new card, it is unsleeved and you must place it in the sleeve with the enemy. The fronts of the cards are larger than a standard playing card and therefore larger than the sleeve, which means that there's about half a centimetre of the front of the front card that sticks out the top. Now, in part, I believe that's, well, it must be intentional, right? But it makes the cards that you want to insert between the enemy and the front card easier to do because you can slide it in, whereas you might be clipping the top if it was just a normal size card. I get it. And on the back, because they're often enemy side up, when you kill an enemy, you can take that card to your hand, and so the lip that sticks out tells you what's on the other side, so you're not constantly having to pick them up. Fine. I get it. It just isn't good. Right? For a couple of reasons. First of all, you're fighting a boss, and there's specific boss cards. However, the boss cards never have this larger card in them. They're always the smaller card, the smaller enemy card. And that means when you're shuffling, assuming you're just doing a normal overhanded shuffle, or a mass shuffle or whatever, because all cards are sleeved, your fingers are never touching the boss cards, which means that the boss cards invariably slip to the bottom of the deck. You have to be very careful about how you shuffle. So you can shuffle what I would call an Indian shuffle. I don't know how politically correct that is, but that's what it's called in some circles, which is the overhand shuffle sideways. Right, so you're holding the long ends in your fingers, which is so the same width, but they're not the same height. Normally you'd shuffle holding the top and bottom to put that in. So it becomes very difficult to grip both the boss cards and the player cards without actively paying attention to how you're shuffling those cards. Then the upgrades are also longer than the standard playing cards and therefore longer in the sleeve. And so they stick out the top, but they're only the same length as the player cards, which are slightly longer. And it still doesn't fill the sleeve, right? So the sleeves are quite loose. And when you do it, what you end up with is these 3 levels of cards that you're shuffling, which makes it difficult to hold on to and keep steady. And what happens is they kind of slide about a little bit and stick out the top. And what happens is if you ever have an upgrade in a card, remember where I said that the advantage of the longer player card is you could see what was coming up. Well, the upgrade often slides out enough that it covers that information, and so you got to pick up the card anyway. So it doesn't fix it, it doesn't help it. And similarly, by the time you put an upgrade in, the upgrade doesn't tell you what's on the other side of it, because they're all double-sided. They add values to the enemy on one side and you get the advantage on the other, but it doesn't tell you what that advantage is. So you've already negated the benefit of having a double-sided sticky out bit for that, right? So the physicality is problematic to my mind. It's not insurmountable. It is just less fun than I would like. You're constantly shoving the upgrades back into the cards. You're constantly shoving the enemies back into the cards so they're not sticking out over the information you want. You're picking them up anyway because you don't really know what's on the other side, and they don't all shuffle well together. Some of the problem could have been solved by having boss cards being longer. Another solution might have been to have side-loading sleeves where the tabs stick out, and so you could do a normal shuffle or a standard overhand shuffle, we'll say. But all in all, it was less enjoyable a first experience to sit down and start playing this game than it might have otherwise been. Regardless, I did play and had some fun. So game 1, played just the base, the easiest boss that you could play. Didn't seem like there was a way I could lose. Played in normal mode. I had access to some easy damage and some cool abilities. Alright, cool. Game 2, however, I just changed the boss. I didn't change anything else. Didn't see there was like a way I could win. But I hadn't even really got into the boss enemies for it to make a difference, right? So it was just luck of the draw, what cards I was able to take, and what enemies were on the back of them. I died turn 4, again, playing on normal mode, had access to some cool abilities, but had no way of chaining them, particularly. And then, like, my third game was going quite well, until it wasn't, right? There was an enemy that came out. I had a couple of fast enemies, and then a taunt enemy that came out. Fast enemies add enemies that you got to fight each turn. And I couldn't get over the taunt damage to start comboing the damage on the other enemies that I'd already had down, and then died. That game, I would argue there's a couple of things I could have done differently, but it would have required me to know in advance that these fast enemies were coming up and were going to cause me a problem. So, and that I wouldn't get the cards I need, or that taunt card would come out. And I don't know, because the stack of enemies, you only see the top one. But I suppose with every game, there's things you could do differently. And so, whilst the game's supposed to build to this crescendo, right, and you become unstoppable, it also doesn't particularly. Like, the cards themselves are all unique and all different and all do something a bit different. They have different costs. You only get 3 action points in a turn, and a card can cost between 0 and 3. Actually, a card can cost between 0 and 6, I think. You got to find ways of reducing that cost and getting more actions. But most of the upgrades, which you're putting to make your cards better, just on one side, they're adding hit points to the enemy rather than abilities or doing anything interesting. And on your side, you're just potentially doing more damage, or at best reducing the cost, which allows you to combo the main part of the card more effectively with other high cost cards. So the most common thing I would say is you do a couple extra damage, 1 or 2 depending on what you're doing, and it's not terribly interesting. I don't feel like I'm building up into this juggernaut that's able to take on anything that the game throws at me. So whilst all of that sounds quite negative, and it was quite negative, in spite of itself, it's still relatively fun, right? The reason I picked this up and didn't buy it when it was on crowdfunding was a lot of the solo players were saying, actually, no, I'm really enjoying this, I'm really into it, I'm getting this. I was like, alright, fine, you've convinced me. Didn't take a lot of arm twisting, but you've convinced me. And the deck building element, or the mechanism of deck building, does a lot of the heavy lifting, right? That is a fun mechanism to play around with in lots of different ways, and one of my favourites. And so perhaps why I give Mistborn, who's also John DeClaire, and spoken about in the podcast, a bit of a pass as well. It's still fun. It's a bit convoluted as Mistborn. This is comparably, I'd say this is easier or less convoluted, but more fiddly to actually physically operate. So I did enjoy it. I just don't know if I can really recommend it. And if it ever does become an app, I'd probably play it on that rather than real life. The good things about the game, of course, is that it's interesting how he pushes the physicality of what board games can do. So he did Mystic Veil, which was all about cards on top of cards with the card crafting elements.
Yep.
And the other game that I didn't play that was his card crafter, main card crafting one. But his designs have always just come up a little short for me a lot of the time. I played a lot of Space Base, and I bought everything for Space Base, and I enjoyed the sort of campaign elements that were in there and unlocking the stuff. And then I just don't want to set it up. There's too many little cards, and it's too much of a pain to get out and place it all in the middle of the board. And then it's also a bit fiddly to play once you get to sort of higher player counts as well. Mystic Veil, which I mentioned, that was the first video I think you ever put up on the channel, you, me, and Danny and Leisure Games, and it's fine, but the sleeving and unsleeving, again, the physicality element of it meant I just played it on the app, and it was a lot more fun on the app. You could get some real busted combos on the app that I would not want to do in real life. Mistborn, I just mentioned, the breadth of resources there, too much for me to really think it's, a strong entry in the deck building genre. but can be forgiven thematically, and the theme does come through. And then Empire's End, which I think I maybe before we did the podcast, but we played together. I just straight up didn't like. Right, it was nearly good, like the decaying of your empire, good. And it just didn't do. So like all these games are
yeah. Well, it wanted to be no thanks with higher stakes, but it just the betting happened either too often or the stakes weren't high enough on each bet. And a lot of us managed to avoid the sort of majorly negative outcomes of the betting. Very often, like, no thanks can get really tense. I guess that's why it works. I mean, I know some people hate no thanks, right? But there's a reason it's stuck around as a really light game. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically inverted bidding, right? You're paying not to take a card, and Empire's End is the same idea, but very often the bidding would just kind of end with someone going, "Well, I guess I'll have it now." Like it would, but it never quite felt as high stakes as no thanks. And there was no concept of the sort of the pressure running out.
Mm-hmm. Well, just to finish on Unstoppable in particular, and because it's something I'm going to mention again, in just the other game that I've been playing. Unstoppable comes with a storybook, a comic book, ostensibly.
However, I like story.
Yes, but what it doesn't come with is like a small campaign mode or something. Like it's not a game element. It's just a fluff element. And I don't really care about the world that we're in enough that I want that comic. Like I'd much rather that it was used to enhance the gameplay than just provide information about this world. But I don't know whether that was a Kickstarter stretch goal or something, or a crowdfunding stretch goal. I meant to look it up, but it was just, again, I went to pick it up. I was like, okay, cool, I've done that first boss. Now let me get set up how it wants me to for the campaign mode, because it is mostly a solo game. You can play 2 players. And then I opened the comic book and there was nothing. I was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting.
So it's a straight comic book?
Yes, it's just a story, right? It's just a theme. It's just the world building.
Did you read it?
Nope.
No. Well, then we'll never know if it was any good.
Yeah,
but they could have maybe done something like the Nemesis Untold Stories, where they're sort of like part of the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're not necessary, but they link it together and give it a bit of story, and a little bit of fluff.
I don't know what you think about the other card crafting games. Did you play? What was the other one called?
So there's 4 in my mind.
Mm.
One of them I haven't played, but this one would be the 5th. So he did another superhero one called Hour of Need, which I didn't get to play. But as you mentioned, Mystic Veil was the first sort of card crafting one, at least I'm aware of, that he made. And we played that on the channel, so you can go and check that out. You can also check out the next big card crafting thing he did, which was called Edge of Darkness, which I played with Chris on the channel. You can see us playing that. We didn't much care for it. It did a very weird thing where you were sort of trying to defend a city from waves of monsters that were attacking it. At least thematically, that's sort of what was going on. Monsters would come and attack the city, and the city was being run by this sort of automated card river. And so you were like collectively building a single deck of cards, which again is an interesting idea. And the way you would influence the city is by crafting your faction's cards into the city deck. Again, an interesting idea, but the way it manifested was just really, really boring worker placement, and it just wasn't good. More complex, nuanced thoughts in the final thoughts for Edge of Darkness on the channel from many years ago. And then he went on to do Dead Reckoning, which was the pirate card crafting game.
Right.
And that is a much bigger thing. It's a 1 to 4 player game. It is your crafting. I suppose the deck of cards represents your ship and your crew, and mostly your crew. And you're playing the cards from your hand to sort of take actions on your turn, a lot like a sort of a Clank or a Star Realms. Play out the whole hand, and you've got some amount of currency and action points coming off the cards you play. And then the game itself is a 4X, not 4X, sandboxy, sail around the map, interact with, there's some exploration as you discover islands. The further away you sail from the ports, the more sort of powerful cards you can discover and craft into your deck, which kind of represents your crew sort of leveling up and things. it doesn't do anything particularly clever with the card crafting. Really, all you're doing is crafting better crew members into your deck. And so when you have better hands round on round, there's a function where you can conquer islands and build up little bases. You can attack other players, and if they've got a handful of cannoneers, oops. And if they don't, haha. There's this other element as well, which was added in the expansions, which I feel like might be this might be a bit more of a sort of a subjective thing, because it adds these cards that then go into little narrative stories where you get to look up a little booklet and read a little story, and it sort of carries over. You can even make a little sort of, not campaign, but sort of linked games where you carry on the story to story as you go, the chapters of the story as you go through the game. And it sort of unlocks more powerful cards that come into the game and marginally impact the complexity. I really like Dead Reckoning. I think Dead Reckoning's tons of fun. I appreciate that it's pretty random. It can be a little mean, and it's also quite hard to access the expansions. If you care about contiguous story, you might, and you want to like do it all together, you need a really consistent group. And then it's quite hard to just access the expansions willy-nilly with a random group, but you might want the extra parts of it, so it doesn't integrate very well in that way. But I do like the narrative story bits, and you complete some stories as well in specific games, and you can sort of start off a story and then complete it, and you get some like ghost ship or a haunted pirate or something, and it's great. I really like it. I think Dead Reckoning, by the sounds of it, is possibly the best implementation of the card crafting system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, not played that one. I'd give it another go.
I think if you like Outer Rim or Merchants and Marauders or that sort of thing, you should give Dead Reckoning a try.
All right.
But it is a session game. Like, it's quite long, and because it's card craft, it's only 4-player, and because it's card crafting, it's a little bit of faff to set up and tear down.
I don't mind a bit of faff.
Yeah, this definitely sounds like it is less faff than Unstoppable, or perhaps because it's a longer multiplayer game, the faff to playtime ratio is more acceptable.
I don't think there is. I think the setup teardown time is not too bad for Unstoppable, because your deck never gets too big, so you're only ever taking apart a dozen cards and putting them back in the respective piles and whatnot at the end. So it's not that bad, right? But for how long you're playing and whatever else, it's just the when you're doing it. In terms of the game, I'm keeping it. I want to give it another go. I've not beat I've actually not even started the third boss yet, so I want to see what that's like. I want to try. There's one of the characters I've not played yet as well. Just changes your starting, or changes 3 of your starting cards. I've tried a couple of the strategies with the sort of junkers, so trying to get money and buying my way into upgrades and whatnot. I've played the sort of combo type strategy where go all in on one faction and try and trigger those. There's a sort of unity one where you go across multiple factions that can work, can be quite strong, but I'd say less so than the one faction, but I've maybe just not got it to work. So there's a few other things that are worth trying within the game. I think it does benefit from variety to some degree. They did quite a good thing because it's harder to get up to like level 6. There's more cards in, say, level 1, 2, and 3 than there is in 4, 5, and 6, because you're going to see more of them. So the variety is quite good there. And because it is a deck builder at its heart, it's still quite fun.
Yeah.
So it still is. I want to play it a bit more. Whether it's worth checking out the expansion for the extra couple of characters and the additional cards, I don't know. I'll have a look into that a bit more, and I'll see whether the more I play it, whether it's something I want to keep long term.
Well, I'll tell you something I didn't keep long term.
Go on then.
It's a grim opening, isn't it? This is another review copy that was given to me at Essen, and to be fair, I picked this up because I thought my partner might like to play it. It did not grab her, but it did grab one of my guests who was visiting. This is a review copy from Arcane Wonders of Super Kawaii Pets, designed by William Cavaglieri and the artists are Pitt Baldritz and Sabine Machacek. And it seems to me the entire premise of this game are that there are very cute, sad pets, and you can make them happy. And that's it.
That's it. I mean, I'm looking at the art just now, and it's yeah, super cute. Oh, that goldfish is crying, but I take it if you can upgrade him or fix him, he becomes happy.
Correct.
What's not to love?
Yeah, look, there is a game. It's super duper basic. There's really nothing here for people who are looking. If you look at the art and you're like, we could have a nice time making these pets happy if you've got very young kids, or you want a filler game to play with your friends who maybe aren't hobby gamers, you just want to look at the cute art, there might be something here for you. But it's very, very simple. It's basically contract fulfillment. Like the pets have little needs. You on your turn you draft some cards that fulfill their needs, and if you can, you play the cards and make the pet happy. If you can't, you wait till your next turn to draft some more cards until you can fulfill their needs. And that's it, And the cards are just a very small random marketplace. And that's basically all that's going on. But the pets are very cute. And anyway, my friend who wanted to play it, and I wanted to play it because it was a review copy, and I thought, I'll do my my due diligence here. She liked the art so much, she had a great time, and then I gave it to her.
Yeah, went home with it.
Yep, exactly right. So yeah, if you like cute pets, if you like cute art, and you don't care about the game, then you can take a look at this. But that's it.
Scathing.
Is it? At least the art's good. At least it's cute.
Yeah, it does look cute just from what I see, but yes, fair enough. There are a lot of games off that ilk.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, look, this is extremely accessible, and you don't have to worry about massive skill deficits because it won't matter.
Very well, very nice.
Okay, so this next one is Wild Gardens. This is a crowdfunding campaign from Rose Gauntlet Entertainment. I believe they've had a second crowdfunding campaign for an expansion and more content. This is designed by Isaac Vega, who many people will know from the Zombies in the Dead of Winter. Yeah, many people will know from Dead of Winter. And the artist is Alyssa Menold, and who's also done Keystone North America, the Keystone games, and some others as well. So a sort of known board game artist. And there were some review copies of this on offer, so I asked for one, and they very kindly gave me one to try. And this is a game about foraging. What you've got here is a board that is a path through the garden, and there is a bunch of random ingredients you can pick up in the garden. Well, there's sort of random places for the ingredients. And you move your piece up and down the board, picking up the ingredients, and then you use those ingredients to cook recipes, and then you use those recipes to satisfy guests. And it has a weight here of 2.47, which is very, solidly middleweight. I'd say it is exactly that. There's a little bit of rules, but not too much. It's not something you probably couldn't sit down and learn from the rule book. It has, together. Like nobody needs to do their homework on this one.
Mm-hmm.
It has a interesting action selection system where you've got these tokens, and sort of thematically what you're doing in a game is you're going on these trips to these locations. And so you flip over a location card, it tells you where you are, and the board is an abstraction of that location. And then actually you go through this one trip, cooking all these things and doing that stuff. And then the board can be flipped over, or you can keep it the same, but you deal a new location card, do a second trip. So 2 trips and the game ends. You've got a player board, and there's these 3 action spots. And on your turn, you're triggering one of the action spots to do some stuff. And then you can also get little skill tokens that you can put into the action spots to upgrade them. So there's a nice sense of progression there as you upgrade the action spots. And also there's 3 upgrades per action, and everyone could do something slightly different, which is neat because it means everyone's sort of not only improving, but also diversifying. The action selection system is kind of neat as well. You get these 5 tokens numbered 1 to 4, and then a 5th token that's a wild. It could be a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And on your turn, you play one of these tokens into the action space to trigger that action space, and then you must move that many spaces. So you have to move the matching numbers on the board, and that's kind of nice because it gives this momentum. It feels like you're on a trip, you're out exploring, you're constantly moving. And there's supposed to be a puzzle where, can you get to the spot you need? Can you get to the strawberries you need to pick? Can you get to the picnic bench so you can cook a recipe? But that never really manifested. We found largely we could always end up where we needed to be. There was maybe across the game, there's 20 or 25 turns or something. And we found that by and large, we always ended up where we needed to be. What you're going to do is you're going to land in a spot and then you're going to grab the materials that you need to cook. And, this is like bark and pine cones and berries. And then you can make a recipe. And the recipes are just an open marketplace. It's contract fulfillment, right? You're trading in the goods you need to complete the recipe. And then you get to take the recipe card and you'll get some benefit from having done that. It's probably points. It could be a jar. More on the jar later. And then the recipes also have types. So maybe you made a dessert or a pastry or a fruity drink. And then if you get the right combination of those cooked recipes, you can then later on trade them in to fulfill a second tier of contract. 2 levels of contract fulfillment, which is a guest. The guest wants a bunch of stuff. So you sack those off. You get the guest, and the guest might give you endgame scoring, or it might give you a sort of triggered effect that you can use, or a passive ongoing benefit, something like that. So this probably all sounds incredibly familiar, and if it does, if you've played any Euros, any middleweight Euros in the past decade, it will feel very familiar. The presentation is on the cards and on the player boards, and the presentation of the pieces and the tokens, and almost everything is really, 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 really great. It looks gorgeous. It's incredibly vibrant, and if too much color is, or even if a little bit of color is too much color for you, if you're the GMT school of usability, you will not like this. But if you like colorful things that catch the eye and make people want to look at it, so joyful components, this definitely has that. And it's really, really nice. I think the actual game board and the victory point board are too much. It is too difficult to see. The other thing is they wanted to randomize the location of the things that you're picking up. And so you randomly distribute a series of tokens, but it often means like there's acorns in the river and seaweed in the trees. And you're like, well, that doesn't feel quite right. Don't know how I found that there. Probably shouldn't eat that. So there's that. I guess thematically, like a little bit of a ludonarrative disconnect there. But I think everyone had a pleasant time with the game. It was just fine. The victory point track is way too busy as well. It's just too difficult to see what's going on there. It's just a track for points, but it's also 2 simultaneous tracks, you see, because each space on the victory point track is flowers, and your victory point tracker is a butterfly or a bee or a pollinator that flies from flower to flower, and that's cute, and we like that. But some of the flowers are in jars, and there's that jar track. You will manifest jars in your tableau, and every so often you will take the jar action that lets you move along the jars of the victory point track for as many jars as are in your tableau. And you have a little jar token that goes along there, because people who like to forage also like to collect jars. This is known. It's a well-established fact. The thing is, at the end of the jar track is just a more efficient victory point track. So you might be able to shoot from 1 to 4 to 10, and it sort of ebbs and flows in terms of its efficiency. But what you want to be doing is not ignoring that, because at the end of the game, your total score is your straight victory points, which come from your pollinator, plus your position on the jar track. So you can't really ignore that jar track. Anyway, everyone but me ignored the jar track, and I like doubled everyone's scores. So that was a bit anticlimactic. I did say you have to do the jar track, but the problem was that the guests that they were going for didn't have jars on them. Whereas I only served children and animals. Only. And all the children and animals had jars. So I won. And I normally don't talk about whether or not I win or lose because I don't think it's that important so long as I had fun.
Sounds like something a loser would say.
But the thing is, like, I do think like the jar track seems a little odd. The victory point board is very busy, so it's a little bit hard to see. But also, like, the guests felt like weirdly inconsistent in terms of their sort of value proposition. Like, they just felt imbalanced. Some of them rewarding you very little points for something that felt quite hard, and others awarding you massive amounts of points for something you're doing anyway, or that's really beneficial to do anyway. One guest even awarded you points for every guest you have that doesn't have a jar on it. And that just feels like it's only good if you already screwed up and didn't do the jar thing. So I don't know. Like, it's a pleasant enough game. It's very pretty to look at. If you're like, if cozy is the thing you like, and I see things often branded as cozy, and usually to me that means not well-developed gameplay or repetitive gameplay. But maybe I'm being too harsh. But I just feel like, like I like cozy stuff, sure, but I still need the cozy activity to be engaging and compelling. I just, it doesn't have to be mean. Typically, cozy is cooperative and not stressful. But, that doesn't mean I want to, not have fun or be engaged.
Yeah.
So anyway, Wild Gardens, I thought, perfectly pleasant. Definitely, if like middleweight, sort of very stress-free, interaction-free, low stakes Euros appeal to you, this is, a perfectly fine production. I will probably not, I'm not going to keep it. It's
Fair.
that's it.
I mean, I don't know much about it other than what you've just told us, and I've just been browsing through a lot of the images on Board Game Geek, and it looks very pleasant. So it's a shame that it doesn't have enough bite behind it to.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of sort of like compelling little things. Like the action token system feels interesting, but it almost feels a bit like it was a nod to hobby gamers. It's like, here's something, that feels interesting,
Yeah.
but it didn't manifest any like major decision making or challenges, right?
Can you share a space?
No, you jump over people. So
Yeah, okay,
sometimes
so-
the movement, if you're relying on your friends to be on the path and then they move away too far, because you can always rely on them to move because you have to move. But if you were relying on them to at least be close enough that you could get an extra point of movement by jumping over them, that creates a little bit of player interaction, stuff like that. But again, like the boards are so small, I always found a route to the thing I needed most, It was just occasionally I couldn't get a combo off. Like if I wanted to cook and also cook in a space with acorns, I couldn't get to the picnic bench next to the acorns, but I could still get to a picnic bench, so it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and the theme really appeals to me as well. I like the idea of sort of foraging and cooking things, and the recipe cards are delightful. It's like you're cooking like dandelion and burdock soda, and I don't know, like just I can't remember them all off the top of my head. Hickory ice cream, right? Like you're cooking stuff that sounds authentic and real and researched, and maybe it's not. I don't know. That's why I said it sounded like that, because I actually don't know about foraging.
Never cooked anything in your life.
one of my I'm not a bad cook, but I forage at the supermarket. But actually, one of my friends who came and played this with us, the same one that was into Kawaii pets, she does forage, and she's very good at it. And we will just be walking along, and she'll be like, "Oh, this is garlic here," and it's cool, and I like that. I would be like to be more in tune with that stuff. but I didn't really. So the presentation of the game, the theme of the game, loved it, but the actual it's too long as well. Too long.
Okay.
It should have been half as long. Why is it so long? And that's it. That's Wild Gardens.
Okay. Oh, shame, but good to know. Right, let's get into my last, my last game I want to talk at length about just now. And that game is Paperback Adventures. So this is published by Fowers Games and designed by Tim Fowers and Sky Larson. The artist on it is Ryan Goldsberry, who's done most of the Fowers games, or at least appeared in most of the Fowers games. Paperback Adventures is a solo focus game with some questionable multiplayer options. It's another deck builder, would you believe? But where the goal of Unstoppable was to take on kill the boss, the goal of this is to take on and kill the boss. But instead of guns, you have you're using your words.
Good, at last.
The cards you have are letters, and in addition to a few sort of bonus cards you have, you must play a word, a valid word, using your card. So the order you play them matters, what you're actually playing matters, and you may be limited in what you can play based on what words you know and can make, right? So when you make a word, you will trigger the ability of the sort of top card, and depending what way you play them, there's icons on there that will either do damage or help you defend, or add curses, or gain energy, or boost your crowns, which is a type of currency that can be used both during the game and in between rounds. So it's a follow-up to Paperback and Hardback, which are both other Tim Fowers games, which use the same deck building, word crafting system, and both of which I liked okay. But this one I was pulled in by the adventure mode, or the adventure element of it, and I kind of wanted another word game. I think I maybe mentioned that Wordsy is getting a second edition coming out soon. I played that today, actually. I like word games. I like Scrabble. Scrabble's an area control game. I like word game. I'm fine with word. Boggle. I'll play Boggle.
I like word games.
Yeah. So the overall goal of Paperback Adventures is to defeat 6 increasingly difficult enemies by playing your cards in whatever manner you think is best. The icons on the left and right determine what way you splay your cards, right? So if you splayed them right, you would get all the icons on the right hand side of the card, and that would make your leftmost letter the topmost. So that ability is the one that would trigger. If you splayed them left, you would get all the abilities on the left hand side of the card, or all the icons on the left hand side of the card, and your last letter in the word would be the topmost card, so you would get the ability on that card. Mostly you've got attack on the right and defense on the left, so that's kind of where it's not wholly true. Some cards buckle that trend depending on what letters you have, but that is roughly loosely it. You're either attacking or defending depending on what the enemy is going to do. The card that you use the ability of, however, gets burned for the rest of the fight, and so your deck is diminishing quite rapidly. You only start with 10 cards. Your deck is diminishing quite rapidly, so you have a limited number of turns in which to defeat the boss, or defeat the enemy. There's lackeys and bosses in it. Each enemy has a dedicated vowel, so they're weak to a certain vowel. So you might get A, E, I, O, or U, which you can use in every word, and you will always have a wild card, which can be substituted for any letter. So you're not limited to what you draw. You do have a couple of options for making words, but the larger your vocabulary, the better you'll do at this game. Of course, if you just put down anything you like and think everything's a word, you'll never lose. But you play that through, and the enemy actions are dictated by a track that just sequentially goes through top to bottom. That'll tell you what's happening. That'll be a kind of attack they're doing, how much defense they have that turn, any special powers they might have. And you play that until you have defeated the enemy once, in which case they'll flip over and reveal their second side, so that could change up all their abilities or how they're spending their resources, or what their powers are. And then when you defeat them the second time, you win. Reset most of your stats, but your hit points consistent throughout all 3 or all 6 fights. In between, every time you defeat an enemy, you get the opportunity to upgrade your powers and deck. There are a number of items in this game that you can spend energy on to activate each turn. There's a number of MacGuffins, is what they're called. You can have a boss MacGuffin or a normal MacGuffin, and that gives you variable player powers, depending on what you draft. And every single letter card has an upgraded side, where there's usually more icons on the back, or the power that it has is in some way boosted. So deciding whether you want to get a new MacGuffin, get a new item, upgrade a card, or even buy a new letter is a core part of the experience. Each enemy you defeat also has a card where you have a choice of rewards, and usually that will let you do the same thing, whether it's heal, because that's almost the only way to heal, or get a MacGuffin, get an item. You get some rewards for doing so. But usually when you upgrade a card, or sorry, when you get a new letter, it replaces a card. So your deck's never getting bigger, or very rarely getting bigger. And that makes every fight quite frantic, as you're burning a card every time you make a word. So you have and as enemies get tougher, it becomes harder to get enough damage on them to win. So I think that's a fairly reasonable overview of how the game plays. I've played it through a couple of times now, and there's 3 different, not expansions, but extra boxes that go with the core box. So let's talk about that first, right? First thing I dislike is a core box which doesn't have a game in it, much like Final Girl.
Right.
You require an expansion to play the game. Now, having received the box, because I bought it online, I now know that. I didn't really pay enough attention when buying it to know that there wasn't like a sample of the game within the core box. I'm used to buying core boxes from something like Fantasy Flight Games for their card games. You get enough of a game in the core box to play and decide whether you want to buy the expansions. This is not the case. And it's written all over the box, so fair enough. But when I'm buying it online and as a sort of impulse buy, and particularly when the core box was the only thing that was available on the site I was buying it from, I didn't know this. So I just took a punt. And so it came and I was like, I can't even play this. So I went and bought the expansions. But that was also quite tricky, because when I bought the 3 genres of books, right, to play the game with, I wasn't really thinking. I was just like, right, I need to get one of these. And it's like, I don't know what one I want. I'll get them all. But they're about 25 quid each, right? And so having bought the core box, which is about 25 quid, and the 3 expansions, I've now spent 100 quid in a game. I didn't have to, right? I could have just bought the core box and a single expansion. I get that. But I've spent 100
but it's still 50 quid.
Yeah.
Like 50 quid's a lot. I mean, for 50 quid, I expect, a certain amount of game, right?
Yes. And you would get some of that, but it's just much what, like I was saying with Hubworld with Aidalon there, it doesn't feel like I now own 100 quid worth of game. Right? Each box comes with maybe 80 cards, the sleeves to put them in, and a couple of sort of oversized cards along with the player board, which does come with, it's a plastic player board with 4 metal tokens to track your stats, because you need one of them for the enemy as well as one for you. So the core box comes with one, and then you use the other ones for the enemies. And again, I don't feel the value when I look at these boxes. I've just spent £100 on a game. Now, it could just be that that's the way board games are going, and I have the advantage of many years of historic crowdfunding games where 100 quid got you loads, but that's probably diminishing as time goes on. And I'm not grudging anybody.
Remember when they didn't even pay taxes?
Those were the days.
Those halcyon days.
So, like I'm looking back at first season of Zombicide for 100 quid and you got everything. And that's,
oh my God.
Like that's where I'm anchoring myself. So I probably should let that go. And think about
definitely need to move on from that expectation. Those days are long gone.
Those days are long gone. So I need to kind of have that, but it still doesn't feel like quite enough for the price. So definitely try before you buy, because of the other things I'm going to say here. The other problem is that the parts in it are actually quite detrimental to playing, right? So the plastic player boards and the metal tokens are difficult to use together. There's slots around the outside of the plastic board that track all 4 of these stats. They require a significant amount of effort to put in and take out. This is a known issue, as far as I'm now aware, having looked it up online, but not one that I knew going in. So I'm now, you've got to force them in. And sure, once they're in, they stay pretty well. But if you don't put them in quite right, they sometimes pop out a little bit later when you're not looking. I think that's a known issue. I think they're going to change it in the upcoming expansion version. But as I say, I've played the game a couple of times now. The Damsel, which is the fantasy version, and the Pirates plot hook version. And it's okay. Right? My biggest gripe, perhaps, is the game is way too long. It took me about 2.5 hours to play through a full game. So the pirate game took me 2.5 hours to go through, and it was on track. I played it co-op. I'll come back to sort of the rules, but played it co-op, single-hand co-op, and we died to like the boss 2, right? So the 4th encounter, and that was on track for being even longer. And with the length of the game, the limited opportunities to change and upgrade a deck became a drawback in my mind. You know, you're not doing a lot beyond making the words turn after turn, which is the core of the game, and that is the core loop, and that's fine, and it is fun enough. But for a game that long, I really think I want something that's a bit more adaptable mid-game to what's going on, than just having to complete a whole fight, which may be going quite badly, and then there's nothing you can do until the end of the fight. And the fights themselves can take some time. You know, they're not short. They're maybe like 20 to 30 minutes per enemy. And so even a short game where you maybe just fight 2 enemies, you've also then not got enough upgrades that you feel like you've had a good game. Yeah, so that's kind of what I was feeling with that one. I take other issue with the game as well. There's two major crimes in this game, right? The words don't matter, and there's no story. So for a game that is an adventure and paperback and prides itself, you know, like the packaging looks like little books, and it looks like normal size books, to be honest. And it's selling you this story game. There's nothing in it that matters what words you use, and it doesn't hook you in for it to tell a story. So for the words not mattering, to give you an example, the enemies have specific vowels that they give you just to make words with, right? So your starter deck is always your starter deck, but if you're fighting a chicken, maybe you've got an I as a vowel, and if you're fighting some rats, maybe that an A is your vowel. Right, so you're going to be making different words based on having those, but really you've got starting vowels, so it's not making that much of a difference. What it doesn't have is anything where an enemy cares about the words that you're making. So you're just thinking about the same thing over and over, which is the power of your top card and the icons on the other letters that you have. Again, I understand that this is the core loop of the game. I just feel like it could use another dial. Where perhaps making a certain category of word. You're fighting rats. If you make, I don't know, cheese words, right, or something like that, or animal category, or maybe even just flip a random category. You know, make any things made of metal, things outdoors. You know, to give you another dial to think about when you're making the words. Either giving you an advantage or disadvantage, then that would kind of change up what you're doing. It would add a layer of variability that makes you think more than just, well, actually I've built my deck in a way where I can fairly consistently get this 7-letter word off every time I start a round, and there's no reason to change that if you can. You know, there's no pushing my vocabulary, or there's nothing that's making me think, actually, I should make a different word this time, that the game drives you to. Which, again, maybe that's what they want, fair enough. But for the story part of the game, right? The adventure boxes come with no rules. There's nothing in them. There's no paper. There's nothing that gets you started. You're given a character, and it comes with enemies, and it comes with your deck. But there's nothing other than your starting equipment. There's no hook to get you going. So even just having like a couple of lines introducing you to what you're doing. So it's like thinking, the princess's hand had been promised to whoever slays whatever level 3 boss you've taken, like a Mad Lib style intro, but she's not going to give up her freedom. Sneaking out of the castle, she makes her way to the mountains, but runs into your first enemy. Right? I mean, that's very basic. That you could definitely do a lot more with it. It'd be very straightforward. I'm not saying it's easy, but straightforward to elevate this game by providing additional goals that could be met in the sort of the campaign mode, because you're already playing like a campaign style mode. You have to beat 6 enemies, but to be met throughout the adventure, whether that is create 4 tools or name 4 animals or something along those lines. And if you manage to do that during the game at any stage, you immediately unlock a power or something. Again, I'm designing it for them. Like, it's maybe not the game they were going for. It's maybe not something they'd want, but it was just there's levels missing on this game, both in part presentation and in part execution. And it's a bit too long to just want to bust out over and over again. And there's not enough game in, like, say, a shorter version, a shorter run of the game to be super fun. So it's just missing a couple of, some sprinkles on top. It is fine. Deck building and being a word game, might carry this for you. I might look for a different word game to kind of fill the slot that I was hoping this one might. But Season 2, I think, is coming soon to crowdfunding. So I'll see what that adds, and it may add some of the things I've just mentioned. I don't know enough about it, to be honest. But again, listen, I've often said I'm quite a negative person overall. It takes a lot to impress me and to make me gush about something, which is why Bombbusters is so great.
That's how you know it's good.
That's how you know it's good. It was good for me, right? I can understand why some people might not like it, but I was just hoping for a little more in those final finishing touches that would elevate it into a game where I'm like, okay, great, I want to play this. I want to shuffle up the enemies and go again. I want to play the different character and see what powers they've got. I want to add in, I want to play the campaign, and then this time, instead of going through the through the forest, I want to go over the mountains to see how that changes up what the rules are, kind of thing. And whilst there is a lot of variety and variability in the game, just from the nature of it being a deck builder, and the shop being sort of random what comes out, it's not there at the top level that I can say, yeah, this is a great game that you want to go and play. Which I should have probably known, because I wasn't that enamoured with paperback or hardback. I thought they were fine. I just thought this would add in the things that I was looking for. And that's on me. That's what I was looking for. It's maybe not what you're looking for. It is still a good game. Try before you buy.
Well, I would like to try it, if only because I'm interested in games and playing games, and this sounds like something I would enjoy. However, I trust your judgment generally, so I suspect I would be disappointed.
Very quickly, the co-op rules are either, effectively, if you get 2 of the 3 expansion boxes, you can you both play your own game and you fight the boss together, or you both just play your own game sitting there.
Oh my god, okay.
Like, why even... And there's a 2v2 mode that I didn't really look at the rules for, which I guess is you're doing damage to the other person, the other team somehow. I don't know. I didn't really look at that, but yes, the version that I played cooperatively was just 2 of us played the single. We cooperated to come up with what words and what we wanted to do, and I think that's probably the best way of going about it. But it does add time where you're discussing your options, and it's already a lengthy game.
I want to do another real quick one before I smash into my heavy one, which actually probably won't take that long, to be fair. but I wanted to do Trekking the World. You said you played it. Now, did you play first or second edition, Barry?
First edition.
Oh, good. That's good because it means we can talk. Because there's been significant changes in Trekking the
Well,
World
you're
second
also
edition.
requiring me to remember playing Trekking the World.
Well, that's all right. I'll remind you.
You'll remember for the both of us.
I will remind you how the first edition is played and the second edition is played. I played the second edition. This is a review copy that was sent to me by Underdog Games. So thank you for the review copy. This is designed by Charlie Bink and Nick Bentley. Nick didn't work on the first edition, just the second edition. It's worth noting. And the artists of the second edition are Kasaba Bernath, Marta Daneka, Sebastian Koziner, Alexei Shirok, and Alexei Shirok. Is this the same?
I feel like that's wrong, but sure, that's... They both got the same surname, I'll give you that.
And the same first name, just spelled different.
I feel that person's just been added
twice with different spellings of their names, maybe. Correct. Or maybe there's two people with incredibly similar names. You check out the Trekking the World second edition entry on BGG and you discover for yourself the fun. All right. So Trekking the World is a game where we're all playing as tourists or holidayers or explorers, and we're wandering around the world gathering souvenirs and trying to have the best experiences and tours to score the most points. Now, it's worth noting, it says here in the blurb on BGG that this game is for hobbyists who want to entice non-gamer friends and family into playing, hobbyists who like rules-light games with some hidden strategy, folks getting into the hobby for the first time, folks looking for a gift, folks who want to turn their 10-and-up kids onto strategy games, folks who want to learn about places in the world or want their kids to. Who it's not for. Folks who adore the first edition. Folks for whom blocking in the first edition is essential. Hobbyists who dislike rules-simple games regardless of the strategic qualities. Okay, so first up, I would like to clarify, I do not have any problem with rules-simple games. In fact, for me, the depth of strategy directly proportional to the volume of rules is the definition of elegance in game making.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have no problem with rules-light games. The lighter, the better. If we can just start playing right now, even better. If we can start playing and the game reveals itself as we go, amazing. So I showed this to my two friends who are here, and so we played a 3-player game of it. And it's sort of now. I will talk about the second edition, and then I will mention the changes for people who've played the first edition, and then I guess we can have a discussion, and I'll mention some more stuff. So, functionally, all you're really doing is it's a map of the world. It's made up of mostly of locations in the world. It models tourist attractions, so it's you're not going to cities or anything, but instead you might go to Petra, or the Sagrada or something like that. Or the Christ the Redeemer. And then on your turn, you take a card from an available tableau, and the card has 3 things on it. It's got the number of spaces you'll move, it's got some money that you're going to earn, and some souvenir tokens that you will collect for your little suitcase that you're going to fill up with souvenirs. And then you'll be forced to move the number of spaces shown on your card, and you'll collect the money shown on your card, and you'll collect the souvenirs shown on your card. And then based on where you ended up, you can either potentially have a tour, which matches the location you're in. So you could, if you're at the Christ the Redeemer, you could have a tour of Christ the Redeemer, but it costs a lot of money. So if you've amassed enough money over the course of multiple turns, you can cash that in. You'll get a big victory points card, and that's the main source of your victory points in the game. If it's also the game clock, when somebody amasses 5 tour cards, end of game. Finish current round, end of game. When you might also end up in a place where there is no tour, pertinent tour. There's a marketplace of tour cards. Not most things don't have a tour, but there might be an experience, which is or an encounter. I think they're called encounters. It's another face-up marketplace. They're all associated with locations on the board as well. And if you happen to stop there, you can have an encounter. And so you take the encounter card, and this will give you some kind of ongoing. Well, it's they've got several functions. Typically, they're either cash it in when you choose for some kind of benefit, like double the number of souvenir tokens you get, or trade the one you just got for 2 of a different color, stuff like that. Or you can have in-game scoring. Some of them just give you in-game scoring. There are also these little things called tourist tokens, which you can trade in to do stuff. Like there are airports, which you can move through to fly around the world. They cost $1, so they eat into that tour fund. There's also tokens that let you take souvenirs. The souvenirs are on the movement cards, but if you don't end up in the right continent after you've finished your movement, then you don't get any souvenirs, and they're the little touristy tokens let you ignore that. There's also, and so your main source of victory points are these tour cards. You'll also get victory points from encounters that you've picked up that have those effects. And finally, you'll get points from your luggage, which collects all the souvenirs, 4 different colored cubes. And for every completed column, so you're collecting sets of different colors. For every completed set of different colors, you sort of increase the victory points there. So you're trying to make those sets. Collecting the souvenirs also gives you those little tokens that you trade in for benefits, like you can take a chartered flight, you can move extra steps, you can double your money, stuff like that. So then the second edition also comes with 2 expansions in the box. I don't know if every copy does. The one I received does. It's got what's called a bucket list, which is a modular expansion of locations that you must visit before the end of the game, in which case you don't have to. It's just points. If you cross off the whole bucket list, you get 15 points. Additionally, you end the game. So it's another end-game clock. And also it comes with asymmetrical starting characters. They give you some asymmetrical starting tokens and also a power that you can use. So that's nice. Anyway, and they add 2 new token types to the game. So there's more tokens that can be traded. Anyway, like the encounters and the tours are full art cards and they're gorgeous. The encounters have some art, which is very nice, and also text about the thing that you're taking a tour of, which I really appreciated. Clearly, there's some care has been taken to, identify these locations and these places and capture some nice dialogue about them. So, I think as sort of an educational proposition to learn about locations in the world, that's great. And I think that's really interesting. There is enough sort of an efficiency puzzle here because because we played with both modules immediately because we're gamers, Barry. So we threw both modules in right away, and so now you're trying to match up, getting the most money, ending up on the right continent so you can get your souvenir tokens, and ideally ending up on some place on your bucket list, or if not possible, someplace with an encounter. All the while moving towards a tour you want to eventually purchase. Fine. There's enough of a puzzle there. It was compelling enough. I don't think it would have me coming back to this without some excuse, like we have a bunch of people here who can't play very heavy games or who are really into history or really want to read out the encounter cards. Like these 2, my friends, are gamer enough, and they're actually avid travelers. They're very worldly. So but that just they didn't care about any of that, which is really interesting. They were like, oh, we've been there on occasion. But they weren't interested in, say, reading the text on the cards or sharing facts or anecdotes or anything like that. So that was interesting, that part of it didn't really grab them. Whereas I was like quite keen to read out the facts and things. I was like, oh, we could engage with this. But I note that they seem to have pivoted from some of the elements of the first game. So picking up here on what it says about for who this is not for people who adore the first edition, for whom blocking is essential. So you've played the first edition, and
yeah,
the key change here is that if you remember the river of cards, you can draft. So on your turn, after you do your move in the first edition, you either take a tour if you can, or you want to and you can. You take or you draw 2 cards. And so you've got a hand of movement cards, which you don't have in the second edition. And the hand of
Yep.
movement cards gives you a selection of numbers you can use for movement. You can combine them or play them individually. And also they've got icons on, and you have to collect the icons to trade in for the tours. Which doesn't happen in this game either. Instead, the cards give you money and you amass money to buy tours. But the other thing the first edition has is you cannot share a space, so players can block each other. And also those little cubes I talked about, they are on the board itself, and you have to stop in the spaces to pick them up. So there's actually fewer of them in the game, but there's more competition for them because they're on the board and you can see where people are and whether they're close to picking them up and which colors they need, right? Whereas in the second edition, because they're attached to what are called the itinerary cards, because of course they are thematic, it makes sense. Because they're attached to the itinerary cards, then it's really just about what's available in the current marketplace. And if you can't get a color you need, you just have to wait for it to come back up. And you can take a card someone else might need, sure, but you won't always be able to infer that. And you might not want to bother because it would be too much of a sacrifice anyway. So I don't know. I feel like they've added some interesting complexity in the form of the tourism tokens that you can trade in for benefits. I think those are really cool. But I feel like they've also removed some of the sort of the mean interactiveness around blocking on the board and sort of just getting in people's way, so they have to take a different route or a longer route to where they're trying to get to. Did you enjoy it when you played it?
Well, hold on, I'll tell you roughly how much I enjoyed it by looking at my rating. No, a 5.
Okay, so 5 is not very good.
5 is I'll play it if there's nothing else going. The played 5 player. I only played it once. Played it 5 player. I won, naturally.
Did you play with hobby gamers or non-hobby gamers?
Yeah. The things I do remember from the game, I've just been kind of flicking through the board to try and remember, because then I only played it once and I played it in November 2020. So, I've played a lot of games since then.
Yeah, sure, fair enough.
I do remember the competition for getting to spaces first, and I presume that's something to do with the cubes.
Yeah.
I do remember people being in the places other people wanted to go. And that's kind of my overriding memories of it. The set collection type aspect and but I don't remember if people were necessarily in the places other people wanted to go, or if it was people couldn't move to where they wanted to go because they didn't have the right cards.
Well, it would be a mixture of both, right? Because if you want to move to a spot 3 spaces away, you either need to have a 3 or 3 1s or a 1 and a 2. So you need to, in the first edition. In the second edition, you just get an itinerary card that'll have 1, 2, or 3 on it. And then you can spend these little red tokens to add additional steps if you want.
Yeah. And that's about all I can kind of remember. So I don't know, but I didn't come away with a strong positive feeling about the game, based on my rating after that one play.
And were your with the 4 other gamers, were they all hobby gamers or anyone new to the hobby?
I mean, I'd say so. I mean,
because I guess what I'm trying to get at is, this is sort of marketing itself as a game that can appeal to hobbyists while also appealing to new players. And so I guess, and maybe this is just the board game academic in me, but what I find particularly intriguing about this is the fact that they've removed the sort of blocking and the interaction, and I don't know if that was a big part of it or not, but they've made it sort of, I guess, simultaneously sort of gentler and a bit more accessible. But I don't know if that's necessarily making it more appealing, because I found often the best And I mean, I'm not a board game marketer, and far be it from me, because I was about to say, I think what I've found most effective in gateway games is those moments of high sort of emotional engagement, when people get really excited about something, whether or not, it could be like Risk, whether it could be the invasion in Risk, or revealing your words in Scrabble, to draw on two very ubiquitous
Mhm.
games. But having said that, Wingspan is hugely popular, and that has almost no emotional highs and lows at all. So I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think at the time, I don't know whether we'd previously played Boomerang, so Boomerang Australia in particular, although I have played Boomerang Europe. And I know it's not really the same kind of game necessarily, but I think I played both of them around the same time, and I think Boomerang was more enjoyable. So it's like a flip and write, or like a draft and write type um, set collection game is Boomerang if you've never played it. But it has the art for the locations within Australia for the Australian version, and you're collecting sets. And I think we got a similar feel, but I think we played in about a fraction of the time, and we had more fun with it. So I think it maybe came off a little unfavorably just due to um, having played those games in close proximity. They're not the same game, is worth noting, but we got a comparable feel.
Sure. Well, I mean, and there's not a whole lot in the mechanisms of Trekking the World that will feel necessarily unfamiliar. I think it's largely presenting, a specific theme, which is, wandering around, seeing these famous sites from around the world, and presenting those in a depiction of nice art and nice sort of stories. And, that's about it. Um, I do wonder why they made the changes they did. It certainly makes it gentler. We definitely didn't. I mean, the one moment of contention was when me and the other player both wanted to buy the Tour of Christ the Redeemer, and it was just about who could get there faster. But unfortunately for them, I had a passive power that let me teleport, so it was crazy. Um, and I guess on that point
Star
also,
Trekking the
like,
world.
well, so my power let me use the airplane tokens to fly to other players, um, which meant I could move very rapidly around the board in a way that wasn't accessible to the others. Um, and when I did it, I got a souvenir point. One of the other players had a power that meant they started with two of the encounter cards, so they could get the benefits of those powers, whatever they drew. That feels very much more random. Like, that could be really
Mm.
good if you draw two really good encounters, and it could be really disappointing if you don't. Um, so I'm conscious that those powers may not be entirely balanced. Um, but yeah, it was fine. It wasn't, there was nothing wrong with it. It was perfectly playable. I would not. We only played it at 3. I don't think I'd want to play it at 5. That feels like there'd be too much downtime. Um, it's not got enough going on that there. I think that wouldn't be consequential. But at 3, it was perfectly pleasant. It wasn't overly long, but we did end the game using the bucket list, which I ended the game using the bucket list. So I think when I did that, we had 3 tours each. So I do think that module actually shortened the length of the game, which is probably
Mm-hmm.
a good thing, because otherwise we would have been waiting around for 2 more tours. And everyone wants to make sure that they're winning and all the points are visible and calculatable. So people aren't going to be buying tours that aren't going to enable them to win. Um, I also felt a bit like there are these little tour tokens you get that double your money from cards, and it's really difficult to get good tours without those tokens doubling your money. Um, and so people might be waiting around to get more of those, to get more money to buy better tours. So it probably suffers a little bit from drag. So I definitely recommend putting in the bucket list option, just so people. The other thing is, without the bucket list option, given that the souvenirs are no longer on the board like they were in the first edition, it also can feel a little bit aimless. Like, or I would imagine, sorry, I don't know, because I haven't played the second edition without the bucket list, but I very often found myself just going to a place because it was on the bucket list and moving me in vaguely the right direction. So I was like, I'll do that, and then at least I've got that little benefit of ticking something off the list. And I think
Yep.
if I didn't have that, it would have felt slower. So I definitely recommend that module if you're going to give it a try. But yeah, this is definitely a sort of a light game with sort of just enough soupçon of sort of optimization to keep a hobby gamer engaged. But I definitely probably wouldn't go above 3 players, and I would definitely play with the bucket list. I also would play with the identities because they also give you the extra tokens, and that's nice. Um, Albeit some of the identities seem a little less good than others. One of the nice things about the identities is they have a low, medium, and complex status as well, so you can use them to even out a bit of a skill deficit if you've got one at the table.
Fair enough.
My gateway game of choice is Ethnos, and I'd still pick that over this. I just think Ethnos, does a lot of the same sort of vibes of collect, not as Trekking the World necessarily, but Ethnos has never failed me. People love collecting the cards. They love playing the cards. They like the interaction on the map. Ethnos has never failed. So I don't know. Like for me, I find what isn't a good gateway game could be a whole episode that we do. Maybe that should be an episode we do. If you want us to do
There we
that
go.
episode, email us or comment down below.
Nice. Fine. What's the last one then? Shackleton Base?
Yep, that's it. Shackleton Base. Have you played it?
I have not.
All right, Shackleton Base is a sci-fi game about the moon. We're all going to live on the moon. We ruined the Earth, so Journey to the Moon, baby. This is a Euro game. It came out last year. I should bring it up. All right. So Shackleton Base.
Yes, 2024.
Yep. So Shackleton Base came out in 2024. It is designed by Fabio Lopiano and Nestor Mangone. The artist is David Stilben, and the publisher is Sorry, We Are French. And I slept on this one, Barry. I slept on this one because I only like a few of Fabio Lopiano's designs, and I largely don't like Nestor Mangone's designs. I find them to be overly dry Euros that have almost no player interaction. Now, Nestor Mangone has an exception in the co-design with Simone Luciani, which is, of course, Darwin's Journey, which we like. And Fabio Lopiano has some interesting designs. I enjoyed my play of Ragusa. I have no intention of ever going back to it, but I at least liked what he was trying to do with the access to the placement spots and how players could sort of invest in these place action spots that would then trigger off the number of players invested in them. You also build walls, and you can sort of block each other with the walls and be quite mean about that. But also you get points off of, you can build towers that sort of overcome the blocks and things. So there's some interesting elements in Ragusa, but not enough to keep it getting played or around. I also like his very first design, Kalimala, which has this sort of joint player area majority control thing going on. And this is all pertinent because Shackleton Base, it's a 3.69 in terms of its weight rating here, which is, I guess, it's on the heavier end, but it's also modular. So in Shackleton Base, we are research groups going to the moon where we will all work together collaboratively to establish a base on the moon. And of course, in order to do that, we need money. And the money will come from corporate sponsors. And each game of Shackleton Base comes with 3 corporate sponsors. But the box contains 7 corporate sponsors. And you can use any 3 in any combination, and it will pretty significantly change the nature of the game. The premise is that it's a Euro game and you have to get the most points to win. What? But
classic.
The best way to get points is to fulfill the desires of the corporations, which is pretty savage capitalistic commentary, isn't it? So, it's got this sort of core set of rules that are going to apply to every version of the game, and then these three corporations are going to create quite a unique feel every time. And so, in that sense, it's actually probably pretty good value for money right out the box if you don't mind this sort of unpredictable variety to each game. It adds a lot of replayability. There's a lot of potential combinations. I don't know who could possibly work out the number of 3 combinations in a 7 group. Like, that sounds like impossible math to me, so I don't know. But there's going to be a lot of them. So you're at least going to get your value for money if variety is your choice for replayability. But there's a pretty savage economy in Shackleton Base. Like, it's 3 rounds and then the game ends. Each round is functionally some astronauts being shipped to the moon with some resources, and everyone's going to draft a rocket ship full of astronauts and resources, and then you're going to have to make the best of what you've got over the course of the round by taking actions with the astronauts and spending the resources to build up your situation on the moon, which is divided into hexes. And each hex can hold 1 research thing. So on your board in front of you, you've got these different buildings you can build. You can build domes, workshops, which are 2 domes, laboratories, which are 3 domes, or your HQ, which is made up of 6 domes. And they all do different things, right? Like, they all unlock different things. It's a heavy Euro game, so I'm not going to explain a whole lot of it. But, the little domes give you income, and the laboratories give you in-game scoring opportunities, and the workshops give you sort of discounts and passive benefits and things like that. And the HQ gives you reputation, and it actually is just quite a good place to store astronauts. Because after the astronauts come off the little ship that's launched them up to the moon, then they go out onto the action spaces where you put them to take actions. And then later on, they might come and live in the places on your player board where you built the buildings. Because when you build the building, it comes off your player board, goes into that hexagon on the moon. But each hexagon only has room for 3 buildings, 1 of each type. And you can't have 2 buildings in the same hexagon because you have to at least make some effort to look like you're collaborating with the other researchers. So they can build the other 2 buildings in there if they want, but you can't have all 3 of your buildings in 1 moon base. Why would you want to? For so many reasons, Barry. The first is that in order to build any buildings, you need a solar panel in that moon basin. And those cost a rare earth mineral. And those are hard to get. And then once you build the solar panel, you only get to build 1 building. And then everyone else can build a building in there now because you built a solar panel. And they're just going to get the benefit of that expensive solar panel that you built. Ugh. What's worse is that sometimes you put your little astronauts out on the moon to gather resources. And depending on what kind of astronaut they might be an engineer, a technician, or a scientist, they'll gather different resources, all of which you need to succeed in life at the game. But they'll also be looking across the hexagonal spaces in a straight line. And at the end of the game, at the end of the round, the most domes they see, they'll go live there. So if they see more of the pink player's domes than my brown domes, they'll go live in the pink person's domes. And then I don't get to put them on my player board. Functionally, you need astronauts to come and live on your player board at the end of the round because that's how you're going to get the income and the passive benefits from building the buildings. It's like an area majority thing, right? Like a spatial area majority. But it's really interactive because it's difficult to build the buildings. There's going to be corporations that influence things. There's also these corporation tokens that come out that are sort of placed over the course of the game. And if you are the Evergreen Farms, for example, you really care about plants. And so players will get to put out these plant tokens over the course of the game. And then if you want to succeed with the Evergreen Farms, you need to collect the plants. Likewise, there's the factory corporation that wants to build automated factories, and they put out little robot tokens that produce robots to work in the factories. And if you want to do well with them, you need to go collect the little robots. So you need to be next to those. So there's this amazingly sort of like complex spatial puzzle going on the moon. That is not something I expected from certainly from Nestor Mangone, who is usually not interested in this sort of player interaction.
Okay.
Fabio Lopiano, it does feel like it's got those sort of Ragusa vibes, right? I can see the influence there, so that's good. I really like that player interaction in that space. So, now here's my other observation. In order to succeed at the game, you really do need to sort of fulfill the objectives of the corporations. Now, there are a bunch of ways to get points here. Each corporation has like first come, first served objectives that you want to be dealing with. Additionally, though, each corporation has project cards. And this is both not a criticism and a criticism, because there's there's a deck of project cards for each corporation. There are 2 cards that are visible in a marketplace at any given time. And those cards are incredibly powerful. I would argue they are the cornerstone of the game, the project cards. Without building up a tableau of powerful project cards, you're not going to be comboing anything. Because the game's really, really tight on resources and really savage. For example, I talked about the astronauts going onto the moon and collecting resources by looking along lines. Okay, there's a whole system here. You might have to pay money to other players if you look at their domes. It's crazy. But the main thing is the yellow engineers collect the resources from the moon, which you need to do practically everything. It's titanium and rare earth, right? Like build solar panels, because without a solar panel, you can't build anything. So it's very restrictive in its sort of logistical Euro mechanisms to do anything. But if you don't have any yellow astronauts, or you used your yellow astronaut frivolously early on, then you cannot get any resources off the moon. And pretty much your only other route to resources is pray you can get it from a project card, or go through the incredibly long and arduous process of going up the reputation track so you can trigger these minor corporate actions to get a small amount of resources. Like, it's so painful to get resources if you don't have a yellow astronaut to put on the moon and get resources for you. But if you can get the sort of combo off of the project cards to work well, you can chain into a bunch of stuff and it's just bonanza. So the core game is good. The corporations are vitally important, and the project cards and understanding that sort of action efficiency that can come from those, absolutely critical. And the project cards are quite small and difficult to put out on the table. It's really hard to eyeball them. That's my biggest criticism.
Okay, fine. That's not the worst thing in the world.
It's not the worst thing in the world. It is definitely something you need to tell people when you're teaching the game, because I think people's instinct might be to either focus on one corporation or like maybe not read the cards, but focus on the corporate actions that they can do. I do think that the game is sort of bleak enough in terms of its sort of Euro mechanisms that you really need to be like, look, if you want to do well at this game, you have to look at these cards. Like, you cannot ignore these cards. All of your efficiencies come from these cards. If you understand that, I think it's great.
Okay.
I really, really like it. I think it represents a really good sort of value for money proposition in the replayability and the variety. I mean, if you're kind of like a min-maxer Euro player who likes to have the same sort of core experience and just like sort of fine-tune the details play to play, this will be frustrating for you unless you play the same 3 corporations over and over again, which you can do, but you're losing that sort of value for money proposition, which comes from, I think, the fun of just chucking in 3 random corporations and seeing how they interact, you know?
Yeah.
And they do substantially change the feel of the game.
No, I mean, that all sounds great. The combination elements sound like something I'd like to get involved in. You know, I've mentioned before that going up one track and triggering things to go up another track or whatever. But doing something to trigger something's always fun.
You won't get that feeling much in this game.
Is it not?
If you do, you'll feel great. But very often you'll find yourself going,
Oh.
All right, I'm going to put this astronaut here, and I'm going to get a titanium, and then I'm going to pay $1 to Jeff, and I'm going to get a rare earth mineral, and that's it.
Fair enough, okay. So not quite as
And you're going to feel bad about it because you know there was a better way to do that. But you screwed up like 2 turns ago, and now you can't.
now you can. Fair. How many combinations do you think you can make out of 7 cards? 3 out of
7 corpse and 3. It's impossible to know.
35.
There's no way. We haven't invented that math yet. 35.
35.
Well, that's good. Yeah, so I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I actually slept on this one, like I said, because I'm only sort of like in Nestor Mangoni, basically.
Yeah.
But no, I was very, very surprised by this. I thought it was really good.
Nice. I don't know anybody that's got it to get a play to the table, but I'll perhaps check it out at an opportunity.
Yeah, so I mean, this is not my copy of the game. I was shown this by a fellow reviewer who was given a review copy of it, and they wanted to play it, so I agreed to play it with them. And
had a great time.
and I was very, very pleasantly surprised. So I'm really glad I agreed to do that. And largely I'll give anything a go. But as I said, I would have picked up my own copy if I'd known how much I was going to like it, but I didn't anticipate that. Well, I would expect from these designers and this publisher, Sorry We Are French is quite a well-established French publisher. I would have expected from them a sort of a solid Euro that would appeal to the people who like sort of dry, logistic-y Euros. And what sets this apart for me is the player interaction on the moon. And there are some corporations that make that enhance that, make it more savage. I like that. And there's others that play with it in weird and interesting ways as well. I especially like the Evergreen Farm Corporation because it adds farms to the board that produce incomes for the people that get those astronauts off the moon. So it makes those sort of that column game just even more important and mean. And I also like the Skywatch Corporation, who's not, I don't know if they're a corporation, but they are in the game sense, but in real life, I don't know, because their whole thing is, we've seen an asteroid that's coming to destroy the moon. We have to blow it up and save humanity. So like, is that a corporation or is that like a global effort?
Initiative.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But you start with this little hexagon in the center of the board, and underneath it's going to show you 7 spaces that are just going to be blown up by an asteroid. And like, unless you advance the corporation's agendas, you just don't know what's going to be blown up. And it would be absolutely, if you got all your blown up and you didn't bother getting involved with the Skywatch, like you would just be out of the game. Like you'd lose so many points. There's tens of points on the line. So I really like that dynamic because it creates this sort of like pseudo cooperative edge where you're all like, okay, well, I guess we'd better progress the Skywatch so that we can find out what's getting blown up. And then when that gets flipped over, you then have to progress it again to sort of minimize the damage. And if you get it all the way to the end, you negate the damage. They blow up the whole asteroid and you're safe. But when the tile's flipped, you might get a bunch of players who are like, well, I'm not actually in the path of the asteroid, so I don't care about this anymore. Which is, it might allow them to optimize in a way the other players can't now. But I'd point out that realistically, you can't like hyper-focus one corporation. You kind of have to diversify. You have to use those project cards to like bounce off each other. There's combos there and things you can do that I think need to be investigated. You can't ignore anything. And there's a lot of information to take in, like the game itself is quite a lot. And in a way, I almost wish there was like a version you could play without the corporations to sort of get lighter gamers invested, because I played this twice. I played this with my friends who were over on the weekend, and the reviewer who brought it over, it's Mark. Everyone knows it's Mark, who's on the show with me. But Mark brought over the review copy he had, and it was a lot for them. Like, right, yeah. I mean, and they're good, in that they can get their head around systems, but they're not so deep in the hobby that like a lot of these mechanisms you'll see here will feel familiar if you are. But if for them, it was quite a lot to get into. And then, with the corporations on top of that, it was a lot. I brought it to the Tuesday group with the heavy gamers, and I played against the professor who just destroys these games. He destroyed it. It was great, but he really liked it. I had a great time too. But yeah, it was me and two other people competing for second. Yeah, there's just nothing we could do about it. Like the professor's first turn was just like combo this into this into this into this into this, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's how it's meant to be played. It was great though. I loved it. So I really like Shackleton Base. I'll definitely be getting my own copy.
Excellent. Well, perhaps we'll get a game at some point.
Yeah, that would be nice.
All right, nice one. Another good couple of weeks of gaming.
Exactly. 2 good weeks of gaming, and that brings us to the end of this episode of the podcast. So if you've enjoyed this little insight into board gaming and you want to know more, you can do what you need to do wherever you found this. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Whatever you do on Spotify, whatever you do on Apple, I don't know, follow. Spotify has comments, so you can leave a comment on Spotify. You can leave a comment on YouTube. If you want to help support this kind of independent board game coverage, you can always check out the Patreon and consider throwing even just $1 our way. It helps to pay for things like microphones and the website, although I need to do that again because nobody looks at that. Very occasionally I get a message like, hey, you played this game like 4 years ago. Are you ever going to play it again?
Moved on.
I should. Yeah. Well, maybe. I don't know. Like, I'm thinking specifically of Everrain. Chris and I think we played part 2 of that 2 years later. And our Oathsworn has a big 6-month gap in it because, or maybe it was longer actually. I think it might have been a year gap.
No, as long as people don't ask me to play ISS Vanguard again.
Yeah. Well, I've not even gone back to that. And I don't know if I will. It's not looking good. I still have to do Ether Fields.
Doesn't look good.
Magic 8 Ball says it doesn't look good. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the story for all those Awaken Realms campaign games, sadly. But anyway, if you'd like to support this, there are many ways to do it. But even if you just supported it by listening to it, you can always tell a friend that you liked it and come back and join us next time for more board game stuff. Big thanks to the patrons who do support the show. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.